What's up, everyone? How are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto is engaged to Sona? If you enjoy, then please like, share, and do comments. Are you sure you want to do this, Sasuke? You know that you won't win, right? Came the voice of Naruto Uzumaki as he stared at the Uchiha. His Enbu-styled black clothing and black hooded cloak making him look more like a reaper instead of what the Uchiha was used to. His fox skull mask painting a visage of death that made many feel as though there was no hope. The blonde also held a katana, whose blade was as black as the night sky, and it seemed to glow with a bit of purple energy at the edge of the blade. The tsuba was made of a crimson metal and had the shape of a nine-pointed star, though only the points in the front were made to do damage. The handle was wrapped in a black cloth and the pommel was also a crimson red. Sasuke knew that this would be their final battle, his eyes looking down at the water they stood on. "You're right, Naruto. I still don't know why the village turned against you, or how you were able to hide your true rank for so long, but I want you to promise me something." He then looked directly into the blonde's eyes. Naruto sighed but nodded and asked what the Uchiha wanted. His voice was more refined and aristocratic than the Uchiha was used to hearing. "And what is it, my friend?" Sasuke closed his eyes, before activating their full power and drawing his sword. "Take my eyes when you kill me, and then merge them with your body. You are the only one I can trust with them, the only one that can use them for what was truly intended." He then got into his stance and then waited for Naruto to promise him this one last request. Naruto closed his eyes before he nodded. "Very well then, come Sasuke, come and meet your death. I promise that I will keep those eyes away from others and I will only use them when necessary." Naruto then placed his katana in a reverse-held grip, his left hand trembling slightly while the right held his blade. His right foot moving forward slightly and bending the knee to assume a stance Sasuke had seen only one other person use before. "That's Itachi's stance. How did you learn it?" Sasuke gasped. Naruto chuckled and answered, "Who do you think taught his squadron, Sasuke?" The blonde then shot forward and Sasuke Uchiha was hard-pressed to block the first 20 slashes. "Naruto was in Embu for that long? Damn it, the Sande must have sent him to the academy to keep an eye on me. That, or Itachi asked him too." Sasuke thought as he jumped away from the relentless assault of a sword master. He knew that Itachi Uchiha only used this style a few times, and there were never any survivors who faced it. It was like a raging hurricane or a tornado that was relentless. Even Sasuke's eyes were starting to have trouble with predicting the movements. Just like always, he is unpredictable. Sasuke thought as their swords started to clash. Now that he had released the weights that he was using before, he could keep up with the blonde somewhat better. Naruto knew that Sasuke was not really putting his best effort into this fight. He also knew why the Uchiha wanted to hold back a little. "He doesn't want anyone to sense us. The council tried to bribe him into hunting me down, and he wants me to end it." He sighed and ducked under a slash from the Uchiha. "This is different now, Sasuke. I was always holding back in the past." Naruto's voice sounded sad, but even Sasuke knew that he spoke the truth. "I know," he replied as their blades locked for a moment. The council did some digging and found that Uzumaki Naruto had only entered the scene after a nearly 8-year absence. "You disappeared from the age of 2 months, till you joined the academy at the behest of Sarutobi Hiruzen." He then jumped back again. "I still have to wonder why you accepted that mission. It never did end anyways." Sasuke shook his head after saying that. The blonde chuckled sadly. "You're right. I was already the commander of the Enbu at the age of 6. I taught Itachi and his peers from the age of 5 till I was 7, just before I accepted the mission to watch over the next generation." He sighed before finishing, "And now only the two of us remain." Sasuke nodded. "Hi, this new war with the other side of the world was not expected, but here we are. And now the village wants you dead, all because you couldn't save them. What a load of shit." Naruto nodded as Sasuke leapt forward to begin again. The two kept fighting, neither one of them going all out. It looked more like a dance and both were apparently skilled. If anyone else was watching, they would have said it was the most epic sword fight that any had ever seen. Her hair was as black as her eyes and long enough to reach her knees. Her dress was a myriad of strange for a gothic type of girl. Black and white striped stockings, pink shoes, white skirt, and a pink symbol on the back of the black dress. She gazed at the fight, though her eye was really on the black-outfitted blonde. She smiled slightly, though any who saw her would not be able to see it. "You are the one, Naruto-kun. You can stop what that fool failed to ensure. The Trihexa and Yahweh were foolish to think that they could stop it, but you will." She then turned to look at a teenager that appeared beside her. They were both floating in the air, and the new girl wore a white kimono. You are here to get him away from this world, Afes. I shouldn't be surprised. The voice was almost as cold as the now-named younger-looking girl. The Ouroboros dragon goddess nodded. Hi, I have, Koyumi, Shinigami of Universe 93. The Shinigami nodded and stared at the Uzumaki that was fighting. Please, Afes-chan, ensure that Yahweh's group does not acquire him. Only the Citri heiress can be trusted to take proper care of him. No one else. Afes raised an eyebrow as Koyumi never called her Chan, unless she was begging. You know what the Gremory heiress will do then, Koyumi? The Ouroboros asked. The Shinigami nodded. Hi, the mirror of Yata has shown it. Her new pawn will bring disaster if left unchecked. Afes nodded and sighed. I still envy you all for getting that old scrap of whatever mirror used to do that. The dragon then looked back at the boy she had come here for. Oh, and why is that, Afes-chan? Koyumi asked before deciding to tease the Infinity Dragon. Are you perhaps hoping that it will show you who would be worthy to become your mate? Is the void getting so lonely, Afes-chan? Afes slowly turned her head to glare at the Shinigami. Shut up. Her voice was even colder than Koyumi had ever heard before. That wasn't a no, Afes-chan, Koyumi said in a sing-song voice. Afes continued to glare at the other goddess before finally turning back to the fight. Just let me take him away and leave me in peace, Nisan. The Shinigami giggled before turning to watch the fight. It was now ending. Come on, Naruto, stop holding back. Sasuke screamed as he tried to impale the Uzumaki. This fight felt different to him. He knew that Naruto was stronger than him. He also knew that the blonde was still wearing his heart on his sleeve. Are you certain, Sasuke? Naruto asked. You do know what will happen if I unleash even 20% of my power. Not even Kurama in his full form could match that. Naruto stopped Sasuke's sword with the index finger of his left hand. Hi, I am tired of all of this. I can't go on without your clan mate. Karin was the one who made me see. He replied and then lessened his grip on his sword. I loved her, Naruto. Naruto sighed before nodding. Very well, I will send you to her. Forgive me, my friend. He then threw his own sword away, and Sasuke was surprised to see it fade out of existence. He then placed his right pointer and middle fingers on Sasuke's forehead. Sasuke felt a strange type of energy build up in Naruto's fingers and saw the blonde's eyes tear up. May you find joy in the pure world, were the last words that Sasuke would ever hear on the mortal coil. Naruto watched as the light faded from Sasuke's activated bloodline. A small spark of electricity flowing through the Uchiha's head. He sighed and helped Sasuke's corpse lay down. He then heard Kurama's voice. What will you do with his eyes, Naruto? The nine-tailed fox asked. Naruto didn't even need to think. He conjured a scalpel and then started to remove the eyes of his friend. I will keep them locked away, and I hope to find someone worthy of using them. Kurama sighed, knowing that Naruto wouldn't need them, and yet the fox felt that only Naruto was worthy of such eyes. This will take all of my cunning to do. If he finds out that I copied the eyes, then he might beat me. Kurama thought before sending a minuscule amount of his chakra through Naruto's hands. Kurama knew that Naruto wouldn't keep the eyes. He would destroy them, which was why Kurama was making copies. He was also going to work them into Naruto's DNA. They still didn't know that they were being watched and that one of the two observers were preparing to take them away from this world. I will also give him a small blessing. Afes stated, which made Koyumi raise an eyebrow. And what would that be, Yamato? The Shinigami asked. Afes smirked and turned to look at the one she called elder sister. You know that the only blessing I can give is one that defies the All-Creator's laws. Koyumi's eyes widened and she nervously gulped. You're not saying that. Afes hummed and replied. Yes, he will be a paradoxical anomaly. Truly immortal as long as he uses the power, but he won't be able to use it indefinitely. She then raised her left hand and started to lowly chant in a speech that Koyumi had only heard once before. Oh dear, Ka-chan won't like this, but not even I could stop Afes. Koyumi worried at her bottom lip, biting it hard enough to cause pain, but not to draw blood with her fangs. I should call Ka-chan, but I don't want my dear Yamato to get in trouble. Damn it. She did want the boy to be well off and safe, however, so she decided she would wait until seeing their mother, and then letting the Supreme Woman know about it. She didn't know that their mother was watching and laughing at her. Naruto sighed as he sealed the jar with Sasuke's eyes away. He didn't let Kurama know that the liquid in the jar was actually an acid. He rubbed his eyes, feeling a slight burn, but didn't pay too much attention to it. He then turned to the left as he had felt a buildup of power. He spotted two girls. One was a child's age and the other was a teenager. He knew that the teen was a goddess that he was somewhat familiar with, but the young girl he did not recognize. The power came from the younger of the two, and he could feel that it wasn't threatening, but he knew there would be a bit of pain. Damn, this is going to hurt. He sighed before hearing the young girl's voice. Gomen, but you are needed elsewhere. She then cast a spell, and a magic circle appeared around him. He knew that this wasn't a chakra ability, having learned about mana from his father's notebooks 10 years ago. He even knew a few types of magic from studying the pre-chakra arts, even though they were few, plus they were difficult to translate. He glanced at the circle and deadpanned in recognition. Well, fuck me, the Ouroboros. He would have wondered why she was here but didn't have time. He disappeared from that plane of existence, actually from that universe, and then felt pain before blacking out. Shit, fuck, hold on, Kit. Kurama screamed as a wall of colors flew by them. He was trying his damnedest to keep Naruto together. This place was not meant for humans after all. You're probably going to hate me for this, but I have to change you, he said, sighing as he reached for his chakra. He then began molding it to change Naruto's DNA even further. It took a few minutes, but once the change started, it was sudden. From the top of Naruto's head sprouted 2 golden fox ears, and from the end of his tailbone sprouted 9 golden fox tails. The tails and the ears had white tips, though it was harder to see the white on the ears. A hole was torn in the back of Naruto's black Hakama-styled pants. It was a little forceful, Kurama had to admit, but at least Naruto was unconscious for it. Yeah, that would have hurt. His cloak was shredded, so one could see his outfit now. His Hakama were just as black, but there was crimson cloth bandages tied to his ankles and most of his shins to keep the pants from interfering with his leg movement. His sandals were a dark crimson, as were the fingerless gloves. Below the Haori but over the shirt was a crimson and blue vest. It had a black kanji that said Commander on the front and also held the emblem for Konohagakure. His belt was a crimson leather belt that had a buckle in the shape of a fox's head, where the eyes of the head had rubies grafted in them. His mask, which still looked like a sinister fox skull, remained on his face. It was made to absorb just as much damage as his flak vest, though his entire outfit was embroidered with seals to constantly repair itself, as well as be nearly indestructible. His pouches, scrolls, books, and other equipment would not be worried about, as Kurama remembered that Naruto held them in a seal just below his Enbu tattoo. Then again, he could just conjure shit. I can't believe that Jigsan tried to have the old arts wiped out. Magic has a lot more uses than chakra. Kurama mentally sighed. Kurama also knew that Naruto was lucky to have found his father's notes. The Namikaze may have not been a full clan, but they were the oldest family that still existed. Kurama stopped thinking as a light enveloped Naruto, and he disappeared from the void-like place they were in. Kurama was still safely sealed in Naruto's navel, so at least he could watch over the boy who had just become a Kyuubi no Kitsune asterisk. Sona Citri's office, Q Academy, 17th of June 2011. Sona sighed and pulled her glasses from her face before she rubbed the bridge of her nose. She had been gazing at her evil pieces and worried at her bottom. Only one piece had been used, a bishop, and it had been used to turn Shinra Tsubaki into a devil asterisk. She was also dreading the next day. One Sama is coming to visit. Is this punishment for some other life? She groaned, but then a glowing purple light caught her attention. She opened her eyes and placed her glasses back on. What? She gasped as her queen piece started to shift and mutate. It turned a dark purple color and a sword formed pointing up from the crown, looking a lot like the fabled sword in the stone, ready to be pulled out. She stared at the piece and wondered what it meant. But then a magic circle appeared on the ceiling, and from it fell a young man. She jumped, not knowing if he was an enemy. Tsubaki slammed the door open right as he hit the ground and held a naginata. Sona stopped her by holding her hand up when she noticed the teen wasn't moving. She also noticed that his breath was labored and that he had 9 tails coming from his rear. A Kyuubi. She then leaped over her desk and felt his neck for a pulse. It was frantic, and her connection to her pieces was telling her that this teen-aged man was right for her peerage. She turned to glance at her evil pieces again and found the changed queen piece was glowing brighter. Tsubaki approached, her naginata still held in her right hand. Kaichu, what is going on? She then heard Sona gasp slightly and turned to stare at what held her king's attention. Her breath caught in her throat. Sona's eyes widened when she felt the teen's pulse almost stop. She didn't even stop to think as she jumped up to grab the queen piece and then turned back to him and placed it on his chest. Please let this work, she said, and suddenly knew his name from a whisper. I command thee, Naruto Uzumaki, to rise and be reborn. Thou shalt become my queen and live a new life as a devil. Feel joy as you are reborn to be my second in command. The Citri family's magic circle spread beneath the blonde Kitsune Yakai, and the evil piece sunk into his chest. Sona sighed in relief when the connection she had with her piece told her it was a success. Tsubaki dismissed her naginata, as she too felt a connection with the blonde male. She also then felt the power he held. What the hell? She mentally asked herself and nearly fell to her knees. Sona was no better, as the power that rolled off of the teen was so staggering. It was almost like her sister was there at full power, and yet the male was weak. Naruto Uzumaki. She recalled the name before passing out. Tsubaki followed her shortly after. They wouldn't be leaving for a while, 20 minutes later. Afai sighed as she appeared in Sona's office. She looked around to see where Naruto was, and then her eye twitched. She saw Sona Citri passed out, with the teen devil's head resting just above Naruto's waist. She didn't know why she was suddenly irritated, but she figured she would find out later. I suppose I should get you all to a more comfortable place to rest. Her monotonous voice sounded out. If anything would have been nearby, it would have paused. She then approached the two she had come to check on and then noticed Sona's bishop. She sighed again and decided to conjure 3 beds. She used a telekinetic spell to lift them gently and place them on the beds. She then turned to sit on a chair that she had conjured, right next to the bed she had placed Naruto. Might as well finish the blessing, she said after a few minutes, not even paying attention to the fact that Sona was waking up. Sona heard a voice coming from her right and had to stop for a moment. A blessing? What's going on? She opened her eyes and looked right. Though she couldn't see very well without her glasses, she did notice a very young-looking girl standing next to another bed. She looked around and spotted her glasses on her desk. Wait a minute, my office. She wanted to think it all through but would need her spectacles to see clearly. She summoned them to her hand and placed them on. Yep, my office. But how did beds get in here? She turned to the girl and started to sweat in recognition of the symbol on the girl's dress. It was on the back, right below the collar, and it was something that she had been warned about by Seraphal Leviathan, her older sister. Afai's. She then saw a brief light flow from the girl's right arm, and it collided with the young man she had resurrected earlier. She gasped as the new connection she had shuddered slightly before it strengthened. Afai's nearly smirked when she heard the Citri gasp. So you are finally awake, she said and turned to the teenager. Her black eyes stared directly into the Citri's purple pupils, and she nearly smirked at the fear she saw. And what does the dragon goddess of infinity want with me? Sona asked slowly. Afai's eyes showed a small amount of amusement, but her voice grated on Sona's psyche. I am here to tell you that should something bad happen to my champion before his destiny comes, I will destroy you and make you suffer for eternity. The Ouroboros then turned to look at Sona's new queen. He is special, and I must impress upon you that his destiny is tied closely to yours now. She turned to leave and had only one last piece of information to give. He could be stronger than any being you've heard of, which is what I want. Take care of him, Sona Citri, as he will be your best ally, friend, and guardian. Afai's then disappeared, literally fading out of existence. Sona could not feel her presence, not even while she was there. She chose a champion. What in the Satan's names is going on? She then turned to the blonde male that was resting and suddenly felt like being close to him. She felt like a small voice was whispering into her mind, telling her that he was trusted, and that he would be the best thing to happen to her. She didn't know why she was listening to the disembodied voice, but she did. She then approached the blonde and placed her hand on his shoulder. She then felt like she was being sucked through a straw. Sona was startled as she landed in what appeared to be a sewer. Her muscles tensed, and she felt like something was watching her. Kurama smirked as he beheld the one that changed Naruto even further. Let us see, will you be a good leader or a tyrant? He then lowly chuckled as the young lady glanced around. She hadn't looked behind her yet, but turned at the sound of his chuckle. She froze as she beheld a Cubano Kitsune, easily thrice the size of the school. He then asked her an important question. So, this is the one who saved Naruto's life. Tell me, why would you save him when you have no need to do so, young demon? Sona could feel this being's power, and it made her shiver. This Cubi was easily 3 times as strong as her sister, as well as said sister's 3 peerage members combined with her. Sona then caught on to the fact that it asked her a question and called her a demon. She steeled herself and answered, I saved his life because it felt like the right thing to do. Though I am not a demon, I am a devil. Kurama grimaced slightly at hearing her call herself a devil. So, we are in that universe. Damn, he thought to himself. He may have not traveled to other dimensions like the Nibai did, but he did pay some attention to her stories when they were all younger. Ah, my apologies, young one. Where we are from, those born of the underworlds are called demons by default. Know that we are in this universe is somewhat vexing. Naruto may have a small case of shock at learning that we have been thrown into another world. He smirked at her look of confusion. "What do you mean, Yakai?" she asked, though didn't really want to anger him by not knowing his name. "Firstly, my name is Kurama, and I am bound to the young man that you just saved. Secondly, to answer your question, this is not the only universe in existence. We come from a world that does not have devils." Kurama then laid his head on his arms, so that his size wouldn't make her think he would attack. He had felt the truth from her words when she had answered his question. Sona relaxed only slightly when the massive fox seemed to adopt a relaxed stance. It was hard to tell with such a giant creature, after all. She could still feel his power, being a sensor-type mage helped in that regard. She then asked about their location. "Where are we? You said that you came from another world, yet I still feel like I am in my office." Kurama chuckled again and answered, "That's because we are still in your office. We are just in a pocket of sealed space within Naruto's mind. I pulled you in here because I felt the bond forming between yourself and my host." Sona raised an eyebrow. "So you are a spirit then?" she asked. Kurama's roaring laughter made her feel like he was laughing at her, not at her question. "No, young one," he said after he calmed down. "I am a Biju, a tailed beast. Born from the chakra of Otsutsuki Kaguya, a primordial goddess, and given a conscience by her son Hagoromo, whom I call my Tusan." He explained. This surprised Sona, as the only primordial goddess she knew of was Offai's, but then again, with the beast saying that there were other worlds out there, she shouldn't have been so surprised. "The ninja of our world called me a demon, but I was not born of the darkness. I am only a malevolent force of pure wrath to those who break the balance my Tusan created." He paused before continuing. "Those ninja were so concerned with the arts of war that they captured and used me, along with my siblings, as weapons of war." He sighed, and the force of that sigh nearly blew her off her feet. "My third host is the man you saved from death. His mother was the second." Sona gulped at the contempt this being had for humans. "Is that why you speak so highly of him and me, because we are not human?" Kurama chuckled again. "You see Naruto as a kitsune now, but he is the only one whom I have ever called friend. He was human before the Ouroboros threw us through the void to escape that world. I had to use half of my power to change him, and that was just to keep him alive." Sona paused for a few moments before she nodded. "I see, then why have you called me here?" Kurama stared right into her purple eyes. "That is a color he will get lost in?" He then put a small amount of power into his own eyes. The darkness creeped around her, and all she could see afterwards was the glowing red eyes of the beast. "I have called you in here to give you that small bit of information, and to see if you were worthy to lead my host as your chess piece dictates." Sona gulped, fearing that he would not find her worthy, and was thinking that this monster would kill her. The darkness fled from around her, and she could see the Kyuubi smirk. "You have been judged, and I find you worthy. Take care of this young man, devil. Do not shun him, or even try to treat him as a tool. And you will have the most powerful queen piece to ever have been seen on your side." She then felt herself be thrown out of that area, and her eyes widened at seeing the blue eyes of her new queen staring into her own. Kurama chuckled at knowing that Naruto would instantly feel the connection he had with her. He also laughed at the fact that Naruto would flip out at the fact that he was now half kitsune and half devil. "Kurama, what's going on?" Naruto mentally asked while scanning himself. He felt a few anomalies, but the most worrisome to him was a bond he could feel with the girl in front of him. One of his new tails twitched, but he didn't pay attention to that. "Here's the sitrep of all that's happened in the last day. Konoha betrayed us, Sasuke was sent, you two fought. You killed him, then destroyed his eyes. We were teleported away by the Ouroboros dragon goddess. We wound up in a different world, and you were almost killed from the travel. This girl saved your life, but the cost was 2 changes. The Biju replied. Naruto's mind processed this faster than Kurama's reply, but he still wasn't finished with his scan. He had to pause when he fully finished scanning the bond. "Am I really bound to her as a servant? Never mind that. What did you do?" Naruto heard Kurama chuckle, but the fox didn't answer. "Fine, lazy ass." Naruto then noticed that the young lady was coming to consciousness. Her eyes caught him off guard for a moment, and his own lessened their intensity. Sona stared into her queen's eyes and felt a small bit of nervousness at what he would say. She took a moment to calm herself and spoke to him. "It is good to see you awake. You caused quite the scare earlier." She noticed his head tilt slightly to the side, and his eyes changed slightly. His right eye turned black with a red 6-pointed star. His left turned to fully purple with concentric rings and 9 comma marks floating in a lazy spin on those rings. The pupil was a darker purple, and although she could feel power from these eyes, she felt like he didn't even know about them yet. Naruto's brain froze at her voice, and he could have sworn that Kurama was laughing. It would be a while before he could respond, though, as his new eyes were shutting down everything to help heal and settle his new appendages to his psyche. Sona noticed his eyes lose focus, but she heard the voice of Kurama speak to her. Well, shit. I should have known that his new body would take a while to get used to. His mind is shutting down so that he can accumulate to everything that's happened. It shouldn't be longer than a few days. She nodded, not even wanting to figure out how the kitsune was able to speak to her. She didn't know why she did it, but she helped him lie back, and then rubbed his arm in a comforting gesture. I'll need to find a suitable room for him. He doesn't have anywhere to stay. She then heard Tsubaki waking up. Leviathan Manor, Underworld, 17th of June 2011, late evening. Seraphol Leviathan sighed as she sat in her personal study, if one could call it that, as it looked more like a room full of anime and manga. Her outfit was a black nightgown with a few pink stars spread out over it. A pink scarf that her mother had made for her quite some time ago. Feet were bare, as well as not having any undergarments. One would think that she was waiting for a lover to turn up. Her eyes, however, told another story. I'm B.O.O.R. Her scream echoed out through her mansion and the few servants she had ran away from the area her study was in. The mansion shook from the sound of her scream, and it scared everyone in the surrounding few miles. Seraphol-sama, please do not scream like that again, came the voice of her head maid. The woman stepped through the recently opened door, her orange hair styled in a ponytail, and was wearing a pink maid's outfit. Her outfit also held a few baubles that wouldn't be found on a normal one, all in blue. The Satan of diplomatic relations turned to the newly arrived devil. But sissy, I'm bored. She nearly screamed again. That's not my name, Sira, never mind. The maid said, and then placed a goblet of red wine in front of the Satan. And didn't I tell you to call me Levitan? How often do I have to? Seraphol's eyes then glazed over before she turned to look out the balcony door. The maid raised an eyebrow but decided not to question the young-looking woman. Sotan has a queen. I wasn't there to watch her get a cute queen. N.O. Seraphol screamed. The sound cracked all of the windows that were in the mansion. It was even louder than the scream from before. She jumped up from her couch and ran out the door. I'm gonna go-see Sotan. The maid sighed and looked at the damage caused by the Satan's outburst. The windows shattered shortly after. I think I'm going to retire soon. This is too much. 100 years, I'm done. The maid then turned and left the room. She didn't even try to clean the mess of wine. Sona's house, minor mansion, actually guest bedroom, 18th of June 2011. Sona sighed as she sat next to Naruto's bed. It didn't take long for her and Tsubaki to get the young blonde situated as he healed. She felt like today was not going to be a good day for her. One Sama will be at the academy soon or here, she sighed again, feeling her sister's power wash over the mansion. Damn it, she said as Tsubaki knocked and stepped through the door. Kaichu, Seraphol-sama is here. Tsubaki announced before the telltale scream was heard. Sotan, I have come to see you. The annoying scream was heard before Tsubaki was thrown to the side, and Sona was nearly crushed in the dreaded hug of her sister. I was so happy to come here, Sotan. It has been so long since I last saw you, and you never write me. I was getting sad, but then realized you probably don't have the time to write me. Damn paperwork, why does that exist? And then It went on and on for about 30 minutes. Sona was just happy that the Leviathan let go of her after only 2 minutes. She sighed and ignored the inane drabble of her sister for the amount of time that it was going on. So how have you been, Sotan? Seraphol finally asked. The Citri heiress sighed again, though it was in relief at the fact that the Leviathan finally stopped babbling. Just fine, Nisama. Now, why are you here? Seraphol looked like a knife just went through her chest. She even placed her hand over her heart. Oh, Sotan, you wound me so. Why are you so mean to me? She then stopped acting like a child when she saw Sona's eyebrow twitch. I came here to see you for the annual report. I also noticed that you got a queen yesterday and wanted to greet the newest peerage member of yours. Sona sighed again and rubbed her forehead. You won't be able to greet him as he is still recovering from the turning. She then placed her right hand on Naruto's left arm, drawing Seraphol's attention to the teen that slept on the bed. He's had a rough time as of late yesterday. He is a Cuba no Kitsune and had a rough travel to this world. I resurrected him around 22:30 late last night. He was thrown through the dimensional gap to get here, and it did a number on his body. Sona explained briefly, not even noticing that she rubbed his arm in a soothing gesture. Seraphol did notice it and narrowed her eyes at the blonde. Wondering what he had done to earn Sona's slight affection, she asked. You said he traveled to this world. What do you mean, Sotan? Sona's sweat dropped and gazed into her sister's eyes. He's from a different dimension, Nisama. I found that out about 30 minutes after resurrecting him, he was in a critical condition. The Ouroboros dragon goddess stepped in to help heal him. She even said that he is her chosen champion. She threatened this world should he be treated as a slave. She explained, which made the Leviathan gape at her. Chosen champion. Seraphol queried after a few minutes, though the sound made the earth rumble slightly. How the fuck did this escape our intel? Ajuka-chan would have notified us about the Infinity Goddess having a champion, so how did he not know? Sona coldly stared at her sister's eyes. You do realize that I'm not that high on the chain of command, so I wouldn't know. My guess is that it was recent, and since it happened in another dimension, we wouldn't be able to pick up on it. Seraphol blanched and nodded after a moment. I guess you're right, damn. I should have realized that when you said he was from another world. Our eyes only reach to this world at the moment, even though we know there are more out there. Sona sighed again and took her glasses off to rub the bridge of her nose. It was the first time I ever heard of it, she said. Seraphol sheepishly rubbed the back of her head. It's a high-profile kind of thing, need-to-know basis, so only the higher-ups of our faction know about it, though Heaven and the Grigori higher-ups also know about it. The Leviathan explained, then turned her gaze back to the boy. He's cute, though. I want to exclaim Kawaii and rub those ears. Are you sure he's not related to Yasaka? Those features are strikingly similar, she asked. Sona nodded and replied in the affirmative. Tsubaki brought in tea for the two a few moments afterwards. Sona also gave the report that she was expected to give to the Leviathan. It took nearly an hour, but it was only the verbal report. She would have to give the written one by the evening. It was what she had been working on the night before until Naruto appeared. Seraphol also questioned her about the boy a little more, but she couldn't give much information about him. Not until she learned more about the blonde would she be able to give the information that was needed. And even then, it would only be info that would not be a breach of trust. She had decided that after she moved him to her home. She still seemed to hear a disembodied voice speak to her every now and then. It was distinctly female voice, not the voice of Kurama as she could now recognize it, but a different and altogether divine type of voice. It seemed to encompass her in a soothing and motherly way. She wouldn't realize that it was the All-Creator's voice for quite a few centuries. Sona sighed in relief that evening as Seraphol finally left her home. Finally, damn it, why do the four Satans have to be so weird? Is it the price for being so powerful? Her mental question would be answered after a while by her new queen. Tsubaki had also sighed in relief after the woman had left. She shared her king's view about the Leviathan. At least she was serious this time. That's more than can be said about the usual visits, right, Kaichu? Tsubaki asked Sona. You're right. Unfortunately, it won't hold for long. Sona replied before turning to return to her new queen's bedside. I wonder when he will wake up. She said, knowing that her bishop followed her. Tsubaki was still wary about the young man, but wouldn't show that to her king. That remains to be seen, Kaichu. The bishop replied. She was the diplomatic type of bishop as she so chose to be for her king. Rias thought she was the queen of Sona's peerage, but would soon know that she wasn't. Sona hummed in agreement, as she sat down beside the bed once more. Tsubaki grimaced slightly, also at the fact that Rias wanted to meet her king tomorrow. Kaichu, Rias wants to meet with you tomorrow. Will it be at the school or here, or is my liege even willing to meet with her? She asked. Sona sighed as she hated being called with such respect in private. I'll meet with her here. My formal office, and we can have that chess match she so wants. She'll never beat me, not with how she plays. She replied. Tsubaki nodded and turned to leave. She headed for the kitchen, knowing that dinner would need to be prepared soon. I will prepare dinner, Sona. Kaichu, would you prefer something? She asked. Sona thought for a moment before replying. Breakfast food sounds good, Tsubaki, whatever you feel like making in that area. Tsubaki agreed before leaving the room, though she did leave her familiar to watch over her king. She was still leery about the young man. Inner universe of Naruto's soul, pedestal of the Queen Peace. Naruto sighed. As he gazed at the thing that tied him in a bond with the young lady he couldn't get out of his mind. This is clearly an enslavement and resurrection artifact, though this one seems different, he quietly said, approaching the mutated Queen Piece. He slowly brushed his right hand across the bottom of the chess piece. How peculiar to feel such energy wafting from you. I will have to see what this means. He said after a moment as the piece seemed to hum at his words. He then turned his gaze to the opposite side of the pillar he stood on. Your altar is in shambles, our Ouroboros. I must wonder about whether it was from the apocalyptic surge or something else. Only a few know about that time. His words seemed to freeze the area around him, but he continued to walk around both the queen piece and the mural of the Ouroboros. His inner mindscape stayed frozen for a few moments, though he paid no attention to that. To think that the goddess of infinity would finally choose a champion, and that she would choose you, it's quite baffling, though I can see some merit from it. His own voice said from beyond the mural. Naruto sighed and turned to look at the origin of his voice. "Hello, Shade. I trust everything is being fixed," he said to the shadow version of himself. It was a shade, a being that could not be seen clearly in the material realm. Shades could only exist partially in the dead of night, and can only truly exist in limbo. The shadow being chuckled, and its yellow eyes squinted in amusement. "Of course, summoner. Your body is being tended to by the one who turned you into a devil, though the other servant is a touch jumpy. That one even left a creature to watch over the leader. It seems to think that you will cause harm to the leader." The voice turned from his own to a multitude of voices as it spoke. He really hated summoning shades, as the beings were even more unpredictable than himself. Though they did follow the contract, he couldn't use anything else while unconscious. "I see very well. You may go now." He called out to it as he turned back to the mural. "Now what can you tell me, altar of a forgotten domain?" He asked himself quietly, not even noticing the sudden absence of the other being. His research would take some time, but he did open a full connection to his outer senses, just to be safe that the being didn't lie. "I really don't trust them," he quietly said. He could have shouted and none would hear it, for his inner universe was beyond the reach of any other unless he invited them inside. Not even Kurama or the All-Creator could get access. Naruto's room, 20 minutes after Serafall left. Sona looked at her new queen for a moment before turning to gaze at the darkened corner of the room. The sun was in its setting phase, and the shadows it cast grabbed her attention. She could have sworn she saw someone there, but it appeared to have vanished. She frowned and adjusted her glasses slightly by pushing them closer to her eyes. She felt like she was being watched by something from there, but couldn't see anything. Even Tsubaki's familiar was gazing at the area. "That is strange," she quietly said, but stopped as she heard Kurama speak to her. He spoke through the bond that the Queen Peace had with her. "A shade. They are beings that only exist in the darkest depths of any world. The dead of night is normally the only time one can see them. They appear to be people made of shadows. Their true existence only exists in limbo, however. They can only appear in darkness." She frowned further at the small explanation. "It means that Naruto summoned a few to guard him, while he deals with his own inner world to recover." Sona appeared confused for a moment before asking a single question. "Are you talking about the silhouettes of people that appear at night?" "Hi." Shades are the darkest of beings, only existing on the material plane for a few moments normally. Naruto has a contract with the realm of Limbo and can thus summon them. He hates using them, but they are the only thing he can summon while unconscious. The fox said before sighing, "It just means that he doesn't trust what is happening right now. I can't reach him while he is in there, not unless he invites me." Sona nodded and kept an eye on the area for a moment. Not seeing anything else, she turned back to the recovering form of Naruto. "May I ask you something about him? Just a general overview of his character, if I may." Kurama hummed while keeping an eye on how well Naruto was healing. "This is going to take a while, although if she could do something to help him stabilize." His thought carried out before he replied. "Naruto is a very strange person. He wears many masks in the outer world and will not let anyone truly know him easily. He is intelligent and can read people in a way that makes everyone seem like an open book. He is also resilient in his ways, to the point that no one can change his mind once it's set. He doesn't believe in taking much easy and is more than willing to work for his keep." Kurama's voice was quiet through the bond, almost like he was recalling a lot. "He is unusually kind to most people, though he doesn't show it much. In his usual persona, he acts cold and uncaring of most things. He is more than willing to kill those he fights, though he occasionally won't. He is a true commander-class shinobi and can devise assassinations that even the best cannot figure out. He is a warrior, though he is best suited to quick annihilations and stealth." Kurama then sighed, and Sona could feel like it was a military bio. "He is the best that his home has had in nearly a century. His views are moral, but he will not let his enemies escape if he can help it. He is fast enough that none could escape, though, as I said, he will occasionally let some go." The fox finished, and Sona paused for a few moments. "You make it sound like he is a special operative for a military. Is he one, and is he really able to assassinate so quickly without any evidence telling it was him?" she asked, feeling a small tug in her gut. It was a type of fear she had only felt a few times, mainly when Serafal's pawn was nearby. Hi. He was the commander of his home's Black Ops division. He got that rank when he was 6 years old. His abilities are what one would say are a master assassin's. Not even I can recall how many he has killed in such a way before he turned 8. His strength is beyond even me now, and he is fast, quiet, and able to observe everything around him in a critical way that even the best of those who are stealthy will never be able to sneak up on him. Kurama rubbed his throat, not used to talking so much. Though he was willing to give that information to her, it was still a pain. He will need either a few days to get back to consciousness or a skilled healer. The biju finished. Sona nodded and turned to go eat, as she heard Tsubaki call that dinner was ready. I'll heal him in a while. I have a few ways to do so. I will check with you later, Kurama. As the door closed, Kurama sighed. I haven't talked so much in centuries. Not even Naruto talks to me to the point that my throat hurts. Then again, he doesn't need to. It'll be good that he can finally shed that idiot persona. My friend has finally returned. He then laid his head down, choosing to take a nap. Tsubaki's familiar looked around, not even knowing that what Sona was talking to would not be able to appear in the corporeal world for some time. Sona's personal office, 30 minutes later. Are you sure we can trust this boy, Kaichu? Tsubaki asked as Sona was grabbing a few tomes of magic that she had in the manor. Honestly, I'm not sure yet, though there is this strange feeling that I can trust him with anything. Sona replied, putting a tome back on her shelves while frowning at the bookcase. She looked through all of the books before asking, "Where is our tome on restoration?" Tsubaki nodded at Sona's explanation before thinking of where she last saw the book. If I recall correctly, Serafal-sama had to borrow it last year. I'll contact her to see if she still has need of it. Sona sighed and rubbed the bridge of her nose again. No, if she hasn't returned it yet, then it's collecting dust at Kasan's retreat. She then turned to look at her bishop. Are you still going to your sister's this evening? Tsubaki frowned, but knew that Sona needed some time alone. She would leave her familiar behind to watch over her king, however. Hi, Kaichu. I'm only worried about you if that boy should try anything. Sona nodded and felt relief that Tsubaki wouldn't be here. I'll be fine, Tsubaki. He is in no shape to try anything right now, so you don't need to worry. She then turned to her desk. Tell your sister I will see her soon about offering her a place among us. Tsubaki nodded and smiled. Her sister wasn't really related to her, but they had been friends long enough to consider that they were. I will tell Momo. She will appreciate it, Kaichu. Tsubaki then left. She didn't notice Sona's sigh of relief. This'll be the first time I've ever tried healing like this. Bare skin contact. I just hope he doesn't wake up while I'm doing this. Sona mentally perked herself up and headed to the bedroom that housed Naruto, loosening her tie a little as she walked. Sona stepped through the doorway of Naruto's new room and sighed. Kurama appeared to have been waiting as he spoke to her through the bond. Is there a reason that your shirt is askew slightly? Sona sighed again before replying. I have to use an old type of healing we devils know. My tome on the School of Restoration is missing for now, so I'll have to use pure mana and bare skin contact to heal him. She didn't know how the fox could see, but put it off to some strange thing about the seal that held him. She then unbuttoned her shirt and proceeded to remove every article of clothing she had on her. Kurama grimaced slightly, though she could not see it. Yeah, that's old, though many seem to prefer it in the supernatural realms. Sona nodded as she removed her skirt and started to remove her socks. Many of the young devils prefer to use this way, but I can't say that I do. This is the first time I've ever tried it. She finished by removing her black panties. Her hand would have gone to cover her mound, though the fox stopped her. I see. You don't need to worry about it. I don't care enough about nudity to gawk at you. I've never worn clothes before, but then again, I'm too large for normal clothing. I will help you through the process, just don't be tense. If you do not focus enough on your energy, you will more than likely cause harm to both him and yourself. Kurama said, the fox cut the connection he had to visuals in the outer world. You don't have to worry, I've stopped my sight for now. Just relax and get Naruto out of his own clothing. Do be warned, however, his clothing needs to be pressed in certain areas before they can be removed. If not, they'll likely electrocute you. The Biju then walked her through the process of getting Naruto's clothes off. She could see a lot of kanji and other runes in the clothing. Though she didn't ask about them, she would wait for the young man to tell her himself, when she had his trust. Naruto's inner universe, a few moments after he stopped studying the mural. Someone is using BBC restorative magic. I'll need to talk to Kurama, he said, and turned to look once more at the queen piece that resided there. I suppose it would be that young lady. This thing is getting slightly more stable now. He then turned back to the mural. You, however, are very different. He approached the center of the giant pillar he stood on and sighed. This power has only been seen once before, according to Tusan's books, an anomaly. He then sighed and started to leave the place by fading out of it. I'll look into you more later. XXX. Kurama was focusing on keeping Naruto's chakra stable and did not see the blonde approach him, due to his eyes being closed. He did notice, however, when Naruto wrested the stabilization from him. You've returned. The fox spoke. Naruto sighed and nodded when the fox looked down at him. I've been looking into the two new props. That piece she used appeared in my sanctum. There is also another there, one that hasn't been seen in a few cycles. Kurama raised one eyebrow, waiting for Naruto to explain. Naruto continued after a few moments, readjusting the flow of his mana to match his chakra. A dilapidated mural of the Ouroboros dragon goddess appearing as an altar to her. I haven't been able to fully look through it, but it is a blessing. It seems to give the ability of being a paradox, though I can't be too sure until I test it. Naruto finished and closed his eyes fully. I also noticed the two changes you did. I wanted those eyes gone, but I guess we might need them at some point. And please, don't get me started on the fact that you changed me to a yakai. Kurama grimaced and backed away slightly. I apologize, but the second change was necessary. Without it, you would have perished in the void. The eyes, I couldn't let the last pieces of my Tusan's visionary abilities disappear. He made sure that Naruto wouldn't move before he spoke. Naruto hummed and continued keeping his energies in order. I can see the reason for the eyes, and I suppose the travel through the dimensional gap would require the other change, even if it was just to survive. Now I'll have to get used to having the appendages, he sighed and went quiet. Well, at least he isn't trying to beat me, but that could be because he's busy. Who am I kidding? He can multitask. Kurama sighed after his thought and opened another communication with Sona. I'll have to let her know he's back. Sona's manor, Naruto's room, 2134, shortly after Sona started healing Naruto. Sona blushed as she lay with Naruto and continued to heal him. She was focused on the healing, but her face flushed in subconscious embarrassment and slight arousal. She barely noticed when a new telepathic link was established with her, but didn't jump at the voice of Kurama. He has returned from his inner world and is currently working on keeping his energies stable enough for you to finish. I keep failing to remember that he has two different energy types, so you can now loosen your focus. She sighed in slight relief, but grimaced at the thought of the young man knowing whether she was naked. She was about to ask if he did know, but Kurama already answered. He is aware that you are using skin contact for the healing. He actually knows multiple types of restorative magic, but this one isn't used much. His knowledge of spell crafting is near the level of the ancients of our home world, though he doesn't know everything. I doubt he'll awake in time to see you, but he wouldn't care at the nudity. He is still a hardcore shinobi. She grimaced and felt herself heat up a little. It had always been a problem for her when people knew she was naked. It seemed to ignite her arousal quite a bit. She tried to keep it from influencing her, but it still made her body slightly suffer with desire. She sighed when Kurama broke the connection to her mind. He even seemed to have disappeared from the bond, though she knew he wasn't gone. Well, he is at least focused more on keeping his mana in check. Still, what is he thinking? She asked herself, not knowing if speaking aloud would make the young man hear her. She didn't know that he was used to multitasking, even inside his head. She wouldn't learn that for a while, however. She fell asleep nearly an hour after he returned to the seal. Sona's manor, Naruto's room, 19th of June, 0730. Sona groaned slightly as she awoke and reached to the end table beside the bed for her glasses. As she put them on, she looked around the room. Where is he? She mentally asked, not noticing that the balcony door was open and the blonde was sitting on the balcony. His voice startled her and made her blush slightly at its sound. You might want to consider dressing yourself, miss. She looked to the balcony that was all across the manor on the 3rd floor, and she saw him sitting with his back to the door. She jumped at fully remembering she was naked. She then used her magic to dress herself in her preferred relaxation outfit. A black tank top, underneath a pristine gray t-shirt that had an ice blue snowflake on it over her chest. Gray cargo shorts with a brown belt, and finishing off with white socks that reached her knees. She heard him chuckle and looked back to him. It is surprising to find another user of mana, though I suppose I shouldn't be. He then stood, and she recognized the outfit he was wearing. It was the same one she had to take off him last night to heal him. He turned, and the morning sunlight made his eyes seem to glow slightly. The eyes were still the changed ones she had seen the other night, one black and red and the other completely purple. The symbols in the eyes made her wonder about whether they were a sacred gear. He then stepped through the door, and his eyes seemed to glow more in the shade of the room. "Before we begin, might I know the name of the beauty who saved my worthless corpse?" He asked calmly. Sona was still blushing slightly at the sound of his voice, but was able to respond. "Sona Citri, and I already know your name." Her breath hitched when he chuckled again. "And I doubt you are worthless, assassin." Naruto scoffed and told her off. "I am more worthless than the dirt on my sandals when I appeared here, Miss Citri, considering I am now technically a slave to you." His words made her gulp slightly. "I should rip your heart out for that, but I am at least civil enough to hear you out." His tone went even colder than her sister's most powerful ice spells, and she nearly felt like running. She didn't, however, as the fact he said he was now a slave made her bristle. "You are not a slave." She nearly shouted and took a deep breath. "I don't know what makes you think that, but my family has instilled that we treat our servants as though they are our friends. Much like the Gremory family, we do not abuse our peerage." She explained calmly. She had also stood up from the bed. She only noticed now that he was nearly a head taller than her. Naruto hummed and gazed into her eyes for a few moments. It made her feel like he was reading everything about her, and she nearly forgot that Kurama said he could do that. "Say that I believe your statement? What would you do to ensure that I can trust your words, Miss Citri?" He asked and continued to stare into her eyes. She felt like she was before a being that was even more than the gods she knew about. His eyes seemed to radiate power on a level she couldn't identify. It made her feel fear, yet also arousal. Devils found power attractive, after all. She took a breath and slowly calmed down whilst releasing it. I don't know how the words I have spoken can be trusted by you, but I will make sure not to make you feel like you need to take action against me." She breathed again and stared directly into his eyes with a determination he had only seen in the mirror before. "The queen piece entails that you are my right hand, my second in command for the peerage and in raiding games. You hold power over the peerage whilst I am away, and no other member can take that from you." She watched him blink and he raised his eyes skyward. He paused for a moment, getting his thoughts together. "Are you saying that the piece is related to chess?" he asked her. She nodded and wondered how he knew of the game. "I see." He then turned to walk back out on the balcony. "Kurama explained to me that you are a denizen of this world's underworld, a devil if I recall. The fact that you have clearly stated your family is one of a few that do not enslave others is a small comfort," he said as he stopped at the balcony's railing. "I can only presume that others do not do so." He sighed before turning back to her, his eyes alight with an intelligent gaze. "Very well, I will work with you for the time being. You are the only one who can teach me of this world, and if I feel like you would abuse this bond we share, I will make sure that the underworld will not survive. So let's try to get along, Miss Citri," he said in a cold voice, though it wasn't as frozen as before. She then knew that he would need a friend in this world, and she decided to be that for him, to make him see that she would never use him as a tool or a slave. She would not know for a while that he could read her thoughts slightly. She didn't even notice his eyes widen in slight surprise. Q Academy Occult Research Clubroom 0800. Within the old school building of Q's illustrious academy, the clubroom that belonged to Ria's Gremory, sat Kaneko Tauju. Her amber-colored eyes stared out the window of the club's meeting room. Her eyes were narrowed, and the hair on the back of her neck was statically standing straight out. Ria's Gremory stared at the young Nekashu in worry. "What is it, Kaneko?" Ria's asked, her tone showing that she was concerned with the young girl's stance. Kaneko didn't answer for a few minutes, and the pause made Ria's even more worried. The white-haired girl replied after what felt like a long while. "There is a senjutsu user in Q." Her tone was cold to the average listener, but Ria's could hear the fear in the girl's voice. Ria's grimaced slightly, knowing that this fear of Kaneko's was personal. She waited a moment before responding. "We will let Sona know. I have a meeting with her today. You may come along if it will help." Kaneko sighed and then nodded. "Arigato butchu," she said, and Ria's could pick up a slight bit of hope mixed in with the gratitude. They wouldn't realize that the one Kaneko sensed would be there as well until after they would meet him. The door opened, and Akino walked in. She looked pristine as usual, but Ria's could also see worry in her eyes. "Butchu, good morning." Ria's nodded to the greeting, though the Gremory raised her own eyes at Akino's. Ria's then asked her newly arrived queen whilst thinking something strange was going on. "Good morning, Akino. What has you making that expression?" She was good at a lot of things concerning magic, but she wasn't the best censor around. Akino paused and grimaced fully. "There is a large source of power in town. It's coming from Sona's house, and it doesn't feel like anyone we know. She said slowly, her voice taking a very worried tone. Riaz narrowed her eyes. All right, something's going on, and for it to cause these two worry and fear like this, we need to move. She then stood and crafted a teleportation circle. Let's go. Kaneko, be ready for a fight. Aquino, support role with me. She commanded and then stepped into the circle. The other two followed as soon as her command was given. This happened just before Kiba walked through the door to let Riaz know of the meeting's location change. Sona Citri's Manor, main entryway, 0820. Sona walked into the main entryway of her manor, having felt a teleportation circle appearing there. The room was a bit of a classic Victorian style, as was most of the manor. The floor was made of marble, and the pillars holding the second-floor walkway was made of a lighter shade of marble. The walls were of stone and held a gargoyle over the door that led outside. There were a few paintings hanging from the walls, some of Europe, others of Japan. The windows were a Victorian British style and slightly tinted to reduce the glare of the sun. Naruto silently followed her and gazed upon the circle that was forming. It was of the Gremory family, and he noticed that it was taking a little longer than should be. Barriers, at least she knows not to leave her home undefended, he thought, after spreading his senses out around the property. Sona stopped 10 feet away from the circle, still standing on the stairs. Her eyes narrowed, but she waited for the guests to arrive. She didn't know that there would be one more, but Naruto was able to pick up on that fact. Sona watched as 3 forms appeared in the circle, and her eye twitched when they adopted a ready stance. "You're early, Riaz," she said, and almost smirked when the 3 jumped to look at her. Riaz sighed, not noticing Naruto standing behind Sona, or that Kaneko and Aquino froze as the small amount of power he unconsciously released washed over them. "Sona, thank the Mao, we have come to let you know that there is a very strong presence here," Riaz said, before noticing the blonde male yakai behind her. Riaz also noticed the amount of tails he had and gulped. "Never mind, you already know," she said, and then looked to Kaneko. She noticed the girl tensed up and was staring directly at the new person. Sona sighed and decided that this meeting would be held in her office. "Come, we will convene in my office." She then turned around and started heading up the stairs. Riaz almost sighed when the young man followed Sona and motioned for her queen and rook to follow her. She followed the 2 and gulped again. "Yep, Kyubai. Great, I should have called Oni-san." Her thoughts then turned to the reason the blonde was here and why he was following Sona. The personal office of Sona Citri was more like a library than anything else. Bookshelves reached across the walls, and a few were standing out away from the walls by 2 yards. The shelves were filled with many books and tomes of the magical arts. There were only 2 windows, each behind and to the sides of Sona's ebony-colored desk. The ceiling was nearly 2 stories high. As the door opened, Sona stepped through with Naruto following her. He made a mental note to spend some time in the room as quite a few tomes caught his eye, as well as the history books and a few others. Sona continued to her desk, still wearing her casual outfit, while Naruto had taken off his Haori before the Gremory group arrived. Sona proceeded to circle around her desk to her leather office chair. It looked comfortable to Naruto. The leather was in pristine condition and cushioned. It was black with a few purple symbols on the backrest. He would later learn that they were the Citri family's symbol, but were colored to Sona's preference. Riaz, Kaneko, and Aquino entered shortly after Sona sat down. Naruto had decided to stand at the right side of the desk, facing it so that he could see all 4 ladies. His tail seemed to sway slightly in a relaxed manner, though Sona could tell that it was a ruse. He was ready to move at a moment's notice. "He really is trained to kill in a second. I think I got lucky on this one. Sorry, Riaz, you lucked out," Sona thought as she gazed at her queen. She then turned to the other 3 and spoke. "Before we begin, Riaz, I would like to introduce you to the newest member of my peerage." She then gestured to Naruto and smirked slightly. "My queen, Naruto Uzumaki." Ria's eyes widened and she turned to look at the young man. His gaze turned directly to her and his strange eyes made her feel like she was being judged. "Wait a minute, queen." She thought after a moment. "I thought Tsubaki was your queen," she exclaimed. Sona chuckled and brushed the red-haired teen off. "You never asked, so I didn't see fit to tell you otherwise." Sona then pulled out her chess set and set it out. It was an old fantasy-styled set. The board was the standard black and white. The pieces, however, were purple and blue. The kings were styled to look like females in a monarchy setting, while the purple queen was a male. The rest of the pieces ranged from witches to soldiers. The rooks looked like actual castles, and the knights were figures atop horses and dressed in differing sets of armor. Riaz had only seen this set used once before, when Sona got herself out of her own engagement. She knew that Sona valued this set, as it was a gift from Sona's grandmother. It was the last gift Sona ever received from her, as the woman had passed on a few months after. It was rumored that the old Citri matriarch was murdered, though no one knew if that was the truth. Riaz felt a pang at the fact that Sona at least knew the woman, as she had only heard stories of her own grandmother. She put that thought away for later and decided to get some information. So, when did this young man become your queen? She asked as she moved a blue pawn. Sona would always use the purple or black pieces in a normal set. Sona started by moving a knight and answered. The evening of the 17th of June, 2 days ago. Then glanced at Naruto to see him looking at the young Kaneko with a critical eye. What is he thinking about? She mentally asked herself. Naruto glanced to her as though he had heard her question and motioned that he would explain shortly. She had always been able to pick up on certain things through the body language of others as well as the eyes, though she had quite a bit of trouble with his right now. Riaz thought of her next move for a moment, then moved another pawn before fishing for more. I see. Is he related to the Yakai leader somehow? She thought he was, as their hair color was nearly identical, though she didn't know where his eyes came from or why they looked like the eyes of both a demon and a god. Naruto answered for Sona, and his voice made the Gremory group blush. I have no living relatives. They all perished on the night of my birth, my clan decades before that. He said casually, as though he was only talking about the weather. Riaz grimaced while Kaneko's eyes widened slightly. Kaneko knew that when a Yakai talked of a clan, they meant their entire race within an area. There were more than 3 clans of Nico in Japan. One was down to 2 members, her own clan. There were over 20 clans of Kitsune in the world, and 3 of them were also nearly extinct due to wars with other beings. The leader of the Yakai faction was also one such Kitsune, as only the woman and her daughter remained. She could tell he wasn't related, as she could smell his element. Yasaka was a light Kitsune. This man was a shadow type. It made her tense even more, as the shadow types were said to have been eradicated centuries ago. Sona caught the girl tensing even more than before and asked the young newly made first year, Is something the matter, Kaneko? She then moved a pawn and waited for the young Nekashu to answer. Riaz moved a knight and turned to look at her rook. She winced as she saw Kaneko fear the man before them even more than she thought possible. Kaneko froze for a few minutes, still staring at Naruto. Even Akino turned to her when she did not answer for a while. The chess match continued for a few turns, with Riaz losing more than a few pieces, before Kaneko asked Naruto a question that would break her if he seemed to fall into her list of the usual senjutsu users. How can you deal with it? She asked lowly, and continued with a second question. And how is it that a cage kitsune is still in existence? Sona moved her queen piece, taking one of Ria's bishop pieces. Riaz sighed afterwards and pouted slightly as the witch-looking piece was removed from the board. Naruto raised an eyebrow before putting a small amount of chakra into his eyes. He saw that Kaneko was afraid of natural energy and was nearly to the point of pissing herself with the fact that his mana element was shadows. He then answered her first question. You speak of senjutsu as though it were a blight and wonder how I can deal with the malice of the world. It is simple, little kitten. He then allowed his connection with nature to fully open, and a dark purple pigment surrounded his eyes, while his pupils changed to look like a figure eight. Riaz then tensed as she felt the pressure of power fully fall on her. Though it wasn't his full power, they would not learn that for a while. Kaneko even fell to her knees as the power washed over them. I have dealt with hatred all my life. When the people around you throw it at you, you learn how to deal with it early on, especially when you are conditioned to deal with it. He spoke lowly, and the words sounded ominous to all of them. Even Sona found it to be dark. He then continued. When hatred turns to a war for survival, you learn that even the malice of worlds feels empty. When that malice is compared to the darkness of sentient beings, then the hatred of a planet feels like a tame kitten throwing a hissy fit. He then closed his connection to nature, allowing the others to breathe properly again. Sona would later notice that her property seemed livelier in terms of plant life, and that the usual birds would stay there for more than a few hours. Kaneko breathed a little easier, and felt the natural energy around the property seemed to purify. It almost made her moan at the fact that the air was cleaner here now, but she was still trying to catch her breath. She had looked down when his senjutsu power was flooding the area, but looked back up into his eyes after she caught her breath. She saw something in his strange eyes, and it almost made her breath hitch again. His eyes showed someone who was in slight turmoil, but was not willing to fall into the darkness. He then asked her a question that not even Riaz would dare ask. Now, what has you so afraid, young one? Ria's froze, as did Akino. Sona just tilted her head slightly and continued to gaze at Naruto. "What are you thinking, Naruto?" Sona asked mentally, not realizing that Kurama could hear her thought. The Biju answered a few moments later while Kaneko was trying to get herself together from the personal question. "He's going through his, I must help this one phase. It happens fairly often, and only around those that will become good friends later." The fox answered, nearly making Sona jump in fright. The others couldn't hear him as he was communicating through the bond once more. Sona nodded as everyone else was staring at Kaneko now, so they wouldn't question why she did. Kaneko took another breath before answering Naruto's question. "Most who use senjutsu go mad with power and become filled with hatred at nearly all things," she said slowly and in a voice that most would think was a monotone. Naruto could feel her emotions, however, and knew that she was afraid of the hatred. He closed his eyes and sighed. "So, you are willing to cut yourself off from producing children just so that you won't go crazy. You are a strange one, little Nico." His words caught them all off guard. Even Kaneko was confused. She then asked what they all wanted to. "What do you mean, cutting off on producing children?" Naruto sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "And here I thought you would know that." He then gazed directly into Kaneko's eyes. "By not using the natural energy around you, by not drawing it in, you are, in effect, killing your ability to have children. You are choking your biological processing to the point that it will kill your ability in a few years by not drawing in that energy." He then pulled a tome from his pocket dimension, seemingly pulled it from the depths of a void or conjured it from nothing. He opened the tome and turned through the pages until he found the one he was looking for. This tome is on the history of Yakai and says this: "For those Yakai that do not take in the natural energy around them, in accordance with the pact set forth by Lady Amaterasu, they give up their ability to produce offspring and eventually get weaker as time goes on. Even if they are not trained to accept that the malice of any world is not really a problem, they must at least draw in the energy. Otherwise, they succumb to madness and eventual death of entire lines." This is taken from the contract of the sun goddess Amaterasu, chapter 34 of Yakai history. He then closed the tome and handed it to Kaneko. "Keep it. I have 13 other copies. It is written in an older dialect of my home's language, which is similar to Japan's. Translating it should not be difficult." He then turned to watch the chess match once more. Kaneko accepted the book and her eyes widened slightly. She was able to read it and noticed the name of the author. It was the same author who wrote most of the educational books for Yakai and had been named as the most scholarly Yakai to date. One Hinora Katsumoto, **. She hadn't been able to read the books or scrolls much due to her sister not being able to get them while they were on the streets. And the devil that Kuroka was a servant of didn't care about their education, only their power and abilities. She brought the book to her chest and gazed back into it. "Naruto." "Arigato," she said in a quiet tone. Naruto nodded but kept his eyes on the chess match, or at least that is what everyone else thought. His eyes were actually taking in everything that they were doing, their expressions and actions, plus how the two players were strategizing. It was a skill he had to pick up when he first became an Enbu. Peripheral vision was paid almost as much attention to as the main focus, and even the surroundings of the operative had to be monitored when those surroundings could not be seen. His abilities with Sage Mode were even better now than when he fought Nagato's Paths of Pain. He could sense everything around him even before that, but it was now on a level that most could never get close to. The match continued a few moments later, though it wouldn't matter much, as Ria's lost once again to her fellow devil. 3 hours later, Sona sighed as she watched the teleportation circle of Ria's disappear. The main point of the meeting wasn't even talked about much. The problem was that stray devils and many fallen were appearing in town. She had hoped that Ria's would have had the sense to come up with a plan, but again, it wasn't even really brought up. "It seems that girl has too many problems to focus on what is necessary. She won't make a good leader if she can't focus on the problems of now." Naruto spoke and made Sona turn to him. "You noticed that she wasn't paying much attention after you were introduced. She normally puts on the act that she is, but right now—" Sona sighed again and turned to head back to her office. She then turned back as another circle appeared and sighed in relief. "Tsubaki's back." Naruto looked at the new circle and took note that it was the same symbol that Sona's office chair had. It must be her family's circle. The barriers are letting this one through without issue. He then saw a black-haired young lady appear. She also wore glasses, though hers were square, and he took note of her stance. Spear user, this must be Sona's bishop. He thought and noticed that she had tensed up when she saw him. Good. She is wary, which means she is ready to defend Sona at a moment's notice. Sona's eye twitched before she spoke to her bishop. "Hello, Tsubaki, how was your visit with Momo?" Her question was answered with a nod. "Good, may I introduce to you Naruto Uzumaki. He is the queen of this peerage and has agreed to work with us." She then turned back to continue her way to her office. "He has much to learn of this world, and I have agreed to help my second become educated enough on it for the start of the school year. Please, try to get along with him." Tsubaki watched as Naruto turned to follow their king and responded, "Hi, Kaichu." She then followed them and made note of the time. She'd have to cook soon or order lunch. She would ask when they reached the office, not knowing if Naruto would even know what he wanted. At least Kaichu is still alive, and I sensed that Rias was here earlier. She thought with a bit of relief. Occult Research Clubroom, 1240. Yuyuro Kiba had waited for Rias and the other two to return. He didn't know why they had left, but felt that it had to do with Sona's new queen. Tsubaki had told him last night, as well as the change of place and time for the meeting. They had passed each other by while Kiba was going on a contract. As the circle lit up, he noticed the three return, and that Kaneko had a book with her. "Butchu, you have returned," he said, and was about to tell Rias of what he had learned when she spoke. "Yeah, we went to Sona's place," she said before taking her chair and rubbing her forehead. "She acquired a queen, and we spoke about the current problems we've been having with strays and fallen." She then grabbed her paperwork and started getting to work. Akino had moved to stand behind her king's right shoulder, as was her usual place in the room. Kaneko moved to her usual haunt and proceeded to open the book she had with her. Kiba sighed and went a hand over his report on the contract. He then moved to the couch across from Kaneko and caught her eyes being focused on her book too much to talk. "Can't say that that's unusual," he thought. Kaneko rarely talked anyways, so the fact that she was engrossed in a book wasn't much for him to think about, though he could barely read the cover as he wasn't good with old Japanese. He waited for Rias to get finished and would give the verbal report before going to work on his swordplay. Sona's office, 1300. Naruto gazed outside of the left window, behind Sona's desk. He listened as Tsubaki gave a small report about a weak stray devil trying to attack her while she spent time with another girl. So, by leaving one's king and forsaking the bond, one becomes a hideous beast as the power of the underworld takes hold of their mind. It shows that servitude can carry a small perk, and also shows that many are not willful enough to stop it from happening should they do so. He thought before turning back to the two. Kurama responded, sounding like he had finally recovered from all the power he used up. Morons, in other words. Naruto nodded but was pulled from his thoughts when Tsubaki said she would order lunch and asked what they wanted. Sona paused for a moment and replied, "Pizza sounds all right, Tsubaki, supreme." Tsubaki nodded before turning to the blonde. He didn't even think, just said the same. "Don't know what pizza is, but why not?" was his mental question. Tsubaki nodded before leaving. Sona then turned to him and asked about what had been bothering her since Rias had met with them. "Naruto, would you mind explaining about your helping of Kaneko this morning? I am curious about that book you had." Naruto sighed and proceeded to the chair in front of her desk. "That book was one of the few I possessed dealing with the races of yakai. I cannot tell you much about the author, but I can guess she is famous in this world to yakai." He paused for a moment, looking to the ceiling. "Yakai, in general, need their chakra and sage abilities in order to survive. Without them, they are as good as dead. Not using senjutsu creates many problems. By not taking in the energy of nature, they lose the ability to remain of sound mind, and eventually lose the ability to procreate. When they do not whilst young, they never gain the second ability. If she starts her heat cycle soon, then her chances vanish even faster." He explained before looking back to her. "I didn't answer her second question, as the only thing I know about the shadow-type kitsune is that they went extinct. As you may have learned, I was not a yakai before coming here," he said, and Sona nodded to him. "I would have to check the full Citri library for more info on the yakai faction. I possess only a few snippets here," she said, and decided to grab her chess set again. "Do you know how to play?" she asked. He nodded but felt like this would be a defining moment for them later on. "Hi, though I haven't played much. My home was more focused on shogi and go than on chess." He decided to let her set it up and knew that he would be able to win this match if she played like she did with Rias. Once it was set up, he began by moving a blue knight to the right from that same side. It was only the opening move, and his own style mimicked his style in combat. To react instead of plan out everything beforehand, Sona stared at the chess board, her eyes slightly widened, her mouth open in surprise. The chess match had only lasted for nearly 25 minutes, but Naruto had her in checkmate. She would only remember her rule about it a few minutes later, as the outcome of this game was a surprise to her. Tsubaki walked in just a few moments later with a large pizza box. She saw Sona looking at her chess board and also looked at it. She sweat dropped a moment later. Shit, does she remember her rule about losing a match? She asked herself, but approached the desk and sat the box down on it. Kaichu, lunch has arrived, Tsubaki said, and Sona turned to stare at her for a moment. She saw Sona's eyes widen even more and realized that her king just remembered that rule. Yep, this will get awkward soon. Sona then gazed down at the pizza box, which Naruto was also looking at. Arigato, Tsubaki. She then turned back to Naruto. How about a rematch? She asked nervously. Naruto didn't know why she was nervous, but nodded. Why not? He then moved differently in the next match's opening. It was now past 1500 hours, and Sona was gazing at her new queen with a sweat drop. He had won all 4 chess matches they had played. He's good, but how is he winning? He doesn't know about my rule for chess, does he? She mentally asked herself. Even Tsubaki was gazing at him with surprise. Sona rubbed the bridge of her nose and decided to ask Naruto how he was winning so easily. He had only lost about a third of his pieces each game. How is it that you are winning so easily? What is your strategy? She asked slowly, still coming to terms that she would now have to marry him, according to the rule she set up after breaking out of her previous engagement. Naruto chuckled after she finished asking and focused on her. It is simple, Sona Citri. You were trying to counteract a strategy you thought I was using when in fact I had none. How can one counteract a strategy that does not exist? He explained and asked her. Sona's eyes widened, but he continued before she could try to answer. One thing I have learned in my time as an Enbu is that against another strategist, or in open combat, one is best throwing strategy out of the window. No plan survives first contact with the enemy in an open setting, and contingencies must be in place when devising a strategy for taking out one's target. He then paused and looked towards the ceiling. Against a strategist, or in fully open combat, I use a reactionary type of strategical process. I only set a goal, and then react using mental and physical reflexes that make most look slower than a snail. It has helped me survive, and even win many battles and games of strategy. Sona closed her eyes and sighed. Unpredictable then, I suppose that being so would mean the end of many and be a strategist's worst opponent. She then slumped her shoulders. Just wait until my family hears about this. I may have to tell them myself if... She stopped and clenched her hands on the desk. Her head slumped as well. Naruto raised an eyebrow and fished for her to finish. If what? Tsubaki decided to explain for their king. Sona Kaichu was once in a marriage arrangement with another high-class devil. She didn't want to marry the fool and challenged him to a chess match. If she won, then she would be free. If she lost, then she would have to follow her family's wishes and marry the man. She paused for a moment to see if Sona would object to her explaining it to him. When she noticed Sona nod for her to continue, she turned back to him. She easily won that match, from what I have heard. However, her father was nearly labeled as something unsavory by the family that wanted this proposal to happen. Kaichu made a rule in front of the Council of Devil Elders. If a man was able to beat her in chess without fluking, she would marry that man without issue. She then looked back at Sona. Naruto closed his eyes and sighed. Well, that's a real clusterfuck. Probably should have told me that before we started, but I suppose it's out of our hands now. Was there a mystical contract involved with this rule? He asked Sona, opening his eyes to gaze at her. Sona opened her eyes and stopped to think about it. She didn't get far in her thoughts, however, as a magic circle glowed on her desk. Sotie? Came the sound of her sister's shout. The circle seemed to be trying to break from the volume of the shout, and Naruto had to cover his new ears. Sona sighed before speaking. Please, Nisama, do not scream. Now what is it? She then put her head in her left hand while the elbow of the arm rested on the desk. Naruto rubbed his ears and glared at the circle. If this is what I can expect from her family, then I hope we don't actually meet often. He thought, which got a chuckle from Kurama. I called to see if your cute queen was awake yet, and Kasen wanted to tell you that she will be visiting this weekend. Serafal answered, a lot more quietly. Sona sighed in relief at the fact that Serafal wasn't screaming anymore. I see. Arigato one-sama. She then paused and watched as Naruto continued to rub his ears. Hi, he is awake, though I have a favor to ask of you. Sona then gazed back at the circle and waited for Serafal to respond. Wakia need Sotan. Sona sighed and asked, Did Tusan ever use a magical contract to write about that engagement rule I made? The the one that I made after getting free from that other contract. Naruto stopped rubbing his ears, and all three paid attention to Serafal's next words. I'll have to see anywho, I'll look before coming to see you tomorrow. Serafal said, and the circle disappeared. Sona sighed and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Damn it, I was hoping she wouldn't come back for a while, she said with a groan and turned to look at Tsubaki. Tsubaki grimaced and turned to leave. I'll prepare your Kasan's preferred brand of tea leaves. Tomorrow is Saturday after all, she said as she opened the door. Sona nodded before turning back to the chess board. Arigato, Tsubaki. She then looked at Naruto. I hope this doesn't get in the way of anything between us for a while at least. She then reached into her bottom left desk drawer and pulled out a bottle of whiskey with 2 glasses. A drink, she asked before putting the 3 glass objects on her desk. He noticed that she only did this due to stress. Only if you'll allow me to smoke as well, he replied. He pulled a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket dimension when she nodded, as well as an ashtray. He didn't bother with a lighter and used a small amount of chakra to light the one he pulled out of the pack. Sona's nose twitched slightly as she poured the 2 small glasses full. Vanilla, she asked as she pushed 1 glass to him. Having smelled the scent of the smoke, she then looked at him. His eyes had closed and he seemed to be content with the scent. Hi, my preferred scent for tobacco, he responded after taking a drag. He then used a bit of mana to open the window to the left of her and blew the smoke from his lungs out to it. Sona hummed and closed her eyes. It's better than most, she said and sipped from her glass. It's actually pretty good. I don't normally like the scent of smoke much, she thought before passing him a glass mat so that the desk wouldn't be marked. Naruto nodded and proceeded to sip from the glass she gave him. Different than I've had before, but not bad, he said. He then opened his eyes. I take it that most our age cannot drink alcohol. Sona nodded and took another sip. Not in the human world. Only when they reach a certain age are the humans allowed to imbibe. I take it that in your world it was different. Naruto took a drag of his cigarette and answered. As shinobi or part of the daimyo's military, yes. You were considered an adult the moment you put on the headband or officially declared by the Lord. Otherwise, you had to be 18. He then took another sip of his alcohol after he blew the smoke out again. Sona nodded and decided to learn more about her new peerage member. What was your reason for joining your home's military, if I may ask? Naruto hummed and looked at the ceiling again. Originally, it wasn't my choice. My home's leader, the Hokage, did it so that I could protect myself. If the village learned about who my parents were, it could have led to another war. Hiruzen decided to induct me secretly into the Enbu and even went so far as to destroy all evidence of my existence outside of my birth. He took a sip and drag again. The only thing he could not destroy was the Namikaze and Uzumaki family tapestries. He thought that they had seals in place to stop it, but it wasn't a chakra ability. My father used his own arcane knowledge to seal them. He then looked back to her. Over time, it became the only thing I knew, until I became a captain and learned everything about my family. I also learned a few mana arts, and had even started to learn about the primordials, until Hiruzen gave me my final mission. He then sighed. I was considered a strange captain for my squads. I still wore my heart on my sleeve, and was even considered the brightest member of Enbu. I became the commander around a year before I had to take that mission. He sighed and swirled the whiskey in his glass around a little while, staring in it. I was tasked with watching over my own generation as they were becoming ninja. That mission only recently ended with their deaths, the deaths of my friends. He then looked back at her. Would I change it if I had the chance? Only their deaths, not the fact that I was forced to be a part of the Black Ops. I hold pride in my accomplishments, but even I have to say that it wasn't the best choice. Sona nodded and gazed at the clock. It was now 16:30, and she knew that Tsubaki would be preparing dinner soon. She finished her glass and stood. Naruto followed her by drinking the rest of the glass she gave him, and then putting his cigarette out in the ashtray he had summoned. He stood and closed the window the same way he opened it earlier. The two left her office and proceeded to the dining hall. She still needed to give him the full tour, but she would wait till after dinner for that. Citri Manor, Underworld, 17:00, 19th of June, Friday. Serafal Leviathan appeared in her family's manor, directly in the dining hall. Tusan, she called to her father, who had just sat down with his wife for tea. He appeared to be in his late 20s, though his hair was beginning to gray a little on the sides. His eyes were a deep mix of cerulean and amethyst. Across his left eye was a vertical scar that he received in the Devil's Civil War. The scar came from the last hereditary Leviathan on the throne at the time. His appearance was more like a knight from the medieval era of Europe, whilst his ensemble was a more modern business attire. He turned to his daughter, who now held the throne of Leviathan and had actually followed the true original Satan's ways. Many had forgotten that the original four did not care about fighting the other factions, but their grandchildren started those wars. "Yes, princess," he asked her warmly. Even his voice sounded like a righteous knight, and still made many females swoon. Seraphol approached her parents and seemed to be in thought. The two others waited for her to finish thinking about what she would say and knew not to interrupt her while she was doing so. She only waited a few minutes to get her thoughts in order. "I called Sona to let her know that Kasan would visit her tomorrow, and I learned a few things these past 2 days," she said, and paused to see if they would ask. They didn't, as was normal. They would learn everything from her by allowing her to explain things at her own pace. "Sona has finally acquired a queen, and it's quite surprising on what he is and how powerful." She then pulled a picture that she had taken while there, not even letting Sona know that she did. "He is a Cubi, and while I was there, I sensed his power level." She then turned her head to look out the window. "He is weakened for the moment, as he was thrown through the dimensional gap from another dimension and chosen by Ophis to be her champion." This made their eyes widen, but they wouldn't say anything until she was done. "His power, while in a weakened state, is just slightly beyond Surzech's power level." This made her father gape, as only two others currently alive were stronger than Surzech's Lucifer, formerly Gremory, Ophis herself, and the dragon of the apocalypse known as the Great Red. Even her mother, Amelia, gaped at her. She then handed them the picture she had taken. Lord Melodius Citri gazed at the photo and gulped slightly. Amelia also took in the features of Sona's new queen. They could feel the power in the image, and even took note that the body of the young man was built for the most rigorous of combat, speed, and stealth. "His name is Naruto Uzumaki, and no, he is not related to Lady Yasaka. His mana element is shadow, and his body appears to be designed to fight against things even stronger than Surzech's." She finished and watched her parents take in everything she had said. After a few moments, they turned back to her. She then decided to ask about Sona's rule. "When I called Sona earlier, he had awoken. Sona, however, asked me to see if the rule she set up for chess matches was written down with a magical contract. Was it Tucson?" Melodius had to stop for a moment and cast his gaze upwards. He was still reeling at the fact that his youngest daughter's queen was apparently so powerful, and the young man appeared too young for the need of such strength. He had to think about Seraphol's question. "I do not believe so. Shall we go check?" he asked. Seraphol nodded, and even Amelia rose to follow them. The office of Melodius was much like Sona's personal office. It had more windows and a small patio balcony that allowed him and others to step out. There one could look over the garden that Amelia had started and tended to for centuries. It was his gift to his wife, who was quite the botanist and even alchemist. He sighed once about the fact that Seraphol didn't follow in her mother's footsteps, but at least Sona had somewhat done so. The three approached his desk, made of a rich mahogany wood that was cultivated 2 centuries before. He sat in his chair and began looking through the drawers for the rule that he decided to write down after Sona gave it. It would take a few minutes, as he still had much paperwork littered throughout the desk and drawers. Amelia was glad that she didn't decide to take an active role in the family's upkeep. She only helped when the head servants couldn't make it. She preferred her garden over paperwork. "Too bad our daughters are too much into being heads," she thought with a silent sigh. After nearly 10 minutes, Melodius pulled out the paper he was looking for. "Well, here it is." He then cleared a space on his desk to study it. He went through the wording while Seraphol cast a detection on it. "I'm not sensing a mystical component on it. Is this the only copy?" Seraphol asked in a serious tone. She waited for her father to get through reading the paper. As he finished, he cast his own detection spell on it. "It's not the only copy, but I can sense that both were not made with magic, so I can safely say that her worries need not stay on this," he said, which made Seraphol sigh in relief. "Why are you so worried about this yourself, Sierra-chan?" Amelia asked, making Seraphol turn to her. Her voice was so much like Sona's, but her eyes looked like sparkling emeralds. Her hair was a deep ocean blue. The Leviathan looked at both of them and seemed to be a little nervous. I think that her new queen may have won a match or two. I'll have to check with her when we go tomorrow, Kasan," she said, which made the two parents raise an eyebrow. "Don't you have duties to attend to?" Melodius asked. Seraphol shook her head. "No, I'm currently on leave until December, so I can spend some time with the family." She then turned to her mother again. "I want to test her new queen and make sure he isn't negative about the situation," she said, which made her mother nod. "All right then, we'll go see Sona-chan tomorrow," Amelia said before standing to leave. Seraphol turned to her father and thanked him before she left as well. Damn it, my little girl might be engaged now to an unknown. Would you find this funny, father? His mental query would not be answered, as most of the Citri family was killed in the Devil's Civil War. Sona's Manor, rear courtyard, 1900. Sona finished giving Naruto the tour, showing him the back area of her home. It had a few sakura trees and an island in a small pond that housed the largest of those. There was also a garden, and he could smell the medicinal properties of some of the plants. It also held quite a few rose bushes. Sona turned to him and noticed his analytical gaze at the roses. She was also able to tell that he was hiding some pain at seeing them. He must have a deep memory of roses, probably lost someone who liked them. She waited for him to stop gazing at the flowers and spoke when he turned back to her. As you know, this is my main living area. Since you do not have a place to stay, I would be glad to offer you housing here. She said lowly, even though he and Tsubaki could hear it. Naruto looked to the sky for a moment before he sighed and nodded. I suppose that would be best. I must thank you for your hospitality, and I am willing to see just where this will take us. He then turned to the pond and started walking toward it. I shall meditate for now. I believe that you will want to test me at some point, he said as he placed a foot on the water. Sona and Tsubaki gasped slightly as he walked across the 20-foot-wide moat of water surrounding the small island. What is he, flipping Jesus? Tsubaki thought and winced as she thought the name of the son of Yahweh. Sona's eyebrow twitched when she heard a telepathic laugh. It was actually two beings laughing when she recognized. What else can he fly without the need of wings? She mentally asked, and Kurama responded, Hi, he can. Sona then sighed. Tsubaki, she called to her bishop. Tsubaki turned to her. Hi, Kaichu. Sona then turned to her. Let's keep this quiet until he decides to reveal it to others. We don't need others griping for his service. Tsubaki nodded, not knowing that the shinobi could do more than walk on water. Hi, Kaichu. She responded. She then paused for a moment. Momo would like to meet with you tomorrow. She feels like she is ready to join. Sona hummed and watched as Naruto sat beneath the tree to start meditating. Very well, bring her here tomorrow. Around 9:30 would be a good time. Kasen won't get here till close to 11, so that should give us plenty of time to speak. She then sat on the bench near the pond and watched as the area seemed to brighten up slightly. Even the tree behind Naruto seemed livelier, and she could sense that he was using that senjutsu he used earlier when Rias and her two followers were there. Tsubaki nodded and turned to leave. I will tell her Kaichu. I shall return shortly, she said, but stopped when Sona spoke again. That's all right, Tsubaki, you don't need to return, we'll be fine. Sona then kept gazing at Naruto. She wanted to figure out exactly what he was doing. She then pushed some mana into her eyes and her eyebrows raised. She didn't notice that Tsubaki had nodded and left. She only noticed what was happening around her new queen. He was absorbing dark energy from all around him, and then releasing a lighter energy out. This energy was affecting the plants, water, air, and even the very earth he sat on. It seemed to be purifying the area of some taint that she only now noticed from his action. She also noticed how the animals that frolicked around at times seemed to approach the pond and gaze at him. Even birds, who were usually going to nest at this hour, landed on the tree. Some even braved landing on him. It was a strange phenomenon, and yet it made her feel more relaxed than she had been for a number of months. She closed her eyes and almost smiled at the peaceful feeling in the air of her property. She even smelled that her roses were healthier now, and her other plants were doing better as well. She decided to sit there for a while. They would return when he was done, as the evening was approaching night-time more. The weather was nice enough, even if the air was starting to cool a little. Naruto's mindscape, Kurama's den. Naruto sighed as his senses told him a few things. He could sense a lot of negativity circling the planet, a lot of which was hatred. Some other things, like greed or even a type of power lust, although those others were far outshined by the malice this world seemed to possess for its inhabitants. This world, can you feel it, Kurama? He asked. The Biju nodded as his eyes were closed as well. Hi. This world is soaked in the blood of those filled with pure rage. I'm sure you can feel the yin side being almost too abundant. It will need some yang to help kick things off, he said. Naruto nodded and opened his eyes. You do know that you no longer need that guise, right, Kira-chan? He said. The fox opened its eyes before sighing. When next it spoke, its voice changed to a female's and didn't sound so loud. You're right. I suppose it would be easier to not hide my true self. The fox's form then glowed slightly before shifting to be smaller. Naruto turned to watch, as he had only seen the great Biju in this form once before. What appeared from the bright light at the end of the transformation could only be called a visage of beauty, at least to those who would like such a visage. Naruto would have looked away at the fact that she was naked, but this would be a serious topic to discuss with her. The teen-looking woman opened her eyes, and they were as red as her fox forms. Her tail stretched, and her rabbit-like fox ears did as well. She also stretched, putting on a show that many would have died just to glimpse. Naruto kept his eyes on her own as she finished stretching. She then pulled her chakra out to clothe herself in a black yukata shirt and black Hakama-styled pants. Naruto smiled slightly before he closed his eyes. The area around them shifted and turned into a white space. It only took a moment before color and objects appeared around them. It was an old Shinto-styled temple and courtyard, with mountains and forests surrounding it. A pond, a river, and a few sakura trees appeared in the area they stood. A few benches, and even a well-cut grass area appeared to his left. Near the grass, a small shrine appeared and a covered sword rack. The now revealed female smiled. He remembered it. Arigato, Naruto-kun. She thought and walked to her friend. She had never told him, though, that she would love to have more than friendship with him, even if that was only a dream. Naruto then opened his eyes and stared directly into her own. He then moved forward and embraced her. "It's good to see you again, Kurama. Your other form was a bit disappointing." He whispered into her ear. She laughed and wrapped her arms around him even tighter than his own hold, almost like she was afraid to let him go. "Hi, but it was necessary for that mission. If anyone would have broken past your mental shields and found me in this form," she said lowly. Naruto sighed and nodded as he pet her head. "Hi, you may be stronger in this form, but there is a bit more of a vulnerability to chakra with it. At least we don't have to worry too much about that now." He spoke and then let her go. She let go of him as well and pouted slightly. "True, but my full Biju form is uncomfortable." Naruto chuckled before his gaze turned serious once more. "We need to figure out what the Ouroboros wanted us here for and why she sent us directly to Miss Citri." He then turned to the grassy area. "Let us spar, we think easier on the move." She nodded before heading to grab a wakizashi. "You're right. Let's see if I can keep up with you, sensei." She jokingly called to him as he made another blade appear in his hand. He formed a clone to continue the nature chakra exorcise he was doing. "Shall we try the usual style or something different?" he asked as he stepped onto the grass and slid into his stance. It was the same stance he had used against Sasuke, but Kurama shook her head. "How about the Darkslayer style asterisk?" she asked. This made Naruto pause for a moment and look up. She then pulled on the bond he had with Sona, pulling the young devil into the mindscape while he was distracted. Sona appeared on the bench, facing them with her eyes still closed. "This will let her see some of his ability." Kurama thought and spoke. "Please, Naruto-kun." Her eyes took on the most influential expression that would make him cave in. Puppy dog eyes with a teardrop and pout. When he looked back at Kurama, he stiffened slightly. "Damn it, no, not that look, please." He mentally shouted. He sighed after a minute, not even noticing that Sona had opened her eyes to see what was going on, or even that she was there. "Fine, Kurama. We can use Darkslayer, just please remember you didn't finish the style's training yet." He then dismissed his current blade and summoned a new one. An okatana still resting in its scabbard appeared in his left hand. He held it by the scabbard with the handle facing towards his opponent. The way he held it was also like a classical samurai, the blade's edge facing the sky while inside the scabbard. The scabbard was purple, with a golden darkness symbol on both sides and near the bottom of it. A dark gold circle encased by another much brighter circle of gold. The scabbard also had a darker purple cloth tied around it just below his hand. The handle was a mix of black cloth and white wood surrounding the tang of the blade. The tsuba and pommel were made of a gold-like metal, though Kurama and Sona could tell it wasn't gold, just colored to look like it. The actual hilt was shaped to look like a full moon, but had a darker colored circle around it. Sona gasped at the beauty of the blade, even if she was still wondering what was going on. "Shall we dance, Kurama?" Naruto asked, his tails taking a lazy swaying motion, almost like there was a breeze blowing them back and forth. Kurama smiled and assumed the same stance he now held, looking as though they were standing and watching something in a casual, relaxed pose, only they held sword in the opposite hands of their dominant ones. "Of course, Naruto-kun, just one moment." She then turned to look at Sona. Naruto glanced at where she was looking and almost sighed. "Welcome back to the Seal Sona Citri. I have brought you here so that you may see some of Naruto-kun's ability. While we figure out a few things, you will see just how hard it is for most things to fight your queen." She then placed her right hand on her chest and bowed her head. "I am Kurama, though you now see my preferred form. I am the Kyuubi that Naruto-kun contains within him. Sona's eyes widened, as she now recognized the feeling of power this young girl seemed to give out. Naruto sighed again, but knew that he wouldn't be able to say anything about it. I suppose it would make her test be less of a shock. He thought, though he doubted that Sona wouldn't be shocked if he had to use his chakra or spells. Let us begin now, Naruto-kun, Kurama said as she turned back to him. The two nodded and flicked the tsuber of their blades to loosen the swords from the scabbards. Sona did not know what was going on or how she had appeared in such a beautiful temple. But she did know that the orange-haired teen-looking girl was Kurama. Power signatures couldn't lie, and her own ability to sense the world around her was nearly as good as her sister's. Some would even say it was better than that. Sona heard Kurama's welcome and explanation next. I'm back in his seal. This doesn't look like that, sewer. She then heard Kurama say, let us begin now, and watched them take a relaxed and yet at the same time tense stance. A fight. No, a spar. She would at least be able to see some of her new queen's ability. She just didn't know that this fight would make her both fearful and aroused at the fact that he was so powerful. Later, she would need some time alone to deal with the second part of it. Naruto and Kurama then shot forward, almost like lightning, and collided their swords with a loud ringing sound. They had both left brief afterimages at their starting point, and Sona now knew that they were so fast. Fast enough that even Surzet's knight would have trouble keeping up. The two continued dashing around the grass field and colliding their blades, all while leaving images that stayed around for 5 to 10 seconds. They even sheathed their blades a few times and used the scabbards as weapons, while also using katas that Sona knew were designed to deal out mass amounts of damage. It continued like this for 30 minutes, before Naruto decided to give a lesson with this spar. You remember the theory of space-time manipulation, Kurama? He asked as they started colliding blades in a fast-paced wave-like wall. The theory of using not seals, but pure chakra to tear through reality's barriers and send something from point A to point B without moving yourself. Their blades slashed together again before they leapt back, and Kurama paused for a brief moment. She nodded and sheathed her blade. Hi, Sensei. It is theorized by the Neodame Hokage and the Yondame that you wouldn't need seals to use a type of reverse summoning that is nearly equivalent to their Hurricane techniques. They never completed it, as both were killed before they could try. Well, one was killed, the other sacrificed himself. She then looked at Naruto. Why do you ask? Naruto smirked, before sheathing his blade and turning to the left. Watch, Kura-chan. He then flicked his sword back into the ready position that they had used at the start and focused on the tree he was looking at. A small amount of chakra surrounded the blade and scabbard he held in his left hand. Kurama and even Sona could sense the buildup of such a small amount of power, yet it was also dense. He then quickly drew and slashed his sword forward, yet slowly flourished and sheathed the blade. As the katana clicked into the sheath fully, a number of lines appeared on the tree. Those lines looked like small silver flashes of light, and they appeared in a circular kind of sphere. In a flash, those lines cut through the tree at a speed that not even Kurama could see with her eyes enhanced. This caused her eyebrows to shoot up near her hairline. Sona, who had been watching everything, gulped in fear, though she also rubbed her thighs together. Naruto then turned back to the two. It is no longer just a theory. It requires control and power equivalent to the Sanbai's reserves. It is a chakra formula, much like the tailed beast bomb. The ratio, as I have worked out, is 1 in yang and 8 in yin, times the distance by meters divided by the strength level of hard or resistant materials. For flesh, there is no need to divide as it is a weaker material. He paused and looked back to the tree that was now splinters. That tree, for instance, would have divided the ratio formula by 12 due to its strength in life force. Solid materials like metal, you cannot divide for, as that would make the technique weak. He then turned back to them. The next biggest factor is your willpower. You have to will a single slash to become multiple, and at the same time will them to appear at the target. Kurama nodded, though she was blushing at the display of the technique. And what are you calling this technique, Naruto-sense? She asked almost breathlessly. Naruto looked back to the wreckage of the sakura tree he had cut down. I call it the Judgment's Divide, though I may call it Judgment Cut. He smelled their arousal, though it wasn't something he was used to smelling. He shrugged it off and turned back to them. I hope this demonstration was enough for now, Sona. But we need to leave. It is nearing 2000 hours. He said before sending both himself and Sona out. Kurama dropped to her knees and finally rubbed her own thighs together. Damn it, he can get me so hot sometimes. I'll need to take care of this. she thought before removing her hakama and beginning to pleasure herself. Sona's manor, rear courtyard. Sona opened her eyes at the same time Naruto opened his own. She felt a mixture of both fear and arousal at what her queen had showed in the seal. She tried to hold the arousal back as well as the fear, but Naruto saw through the second. "You do not need to fear me just yet, Sona Citri." She looked at him as he crossed the water, approaching her after he had spoken those words. "I promise that as long as you do not turn into a tyrant, you will never need to fear me." He stopped directly in front of her. She had to look up to see his own eyes, and they showed that she really wouldn't need to fear him. She couldn't help feeling more aroused and hopeful at his next words. "I never go back on my word when I say I promise. Not even the forces of creation will be able to stop me. Universes will break before I go back on a promise. For that is my nindo." He turned to head back to the manor. "Also known as my ninja way. It has always been like that." Sona's breath hitched slightly as she could hear the truth in his words. She felt even more waves of heat traveling from both her heart and her stomach. Her eyes widened slightly and she froze for a few minutes. She almost whimpered after that brief time. She then noticed that he had already went inside the manor. She made to follow, but almost fell to her knees. Her legs felt like jelly and her lower regions were almost burning with how hot she was feeling. "Shit, what is going on with me?" she asked herself. After noticing that it wasn't going to stop, she ran for her own room. She didn't know that Naruto had seen her run as well as the blush on her face. He had been watching from the roof of the manor and he sighed. "Great, I might have made her attracted to me." He then looked up at the sky. "You all find this funny, don't you?" He sighed again and leapt down to the balcony. He paused in his new room as he heard a moan coming from just a few rooms away, along with the sounds of a shower running. "Well, damn. Why didn't I listen to Yuga when she told me girls liked the nice ones after they got through puberty?" He covered his ears but could still hear Sona's moans for a while. He also now had a label for that strange scent he had smelled earlier. "Words are weapons," they said, "so be careful how you use them, especially around young women." "Damn it," he sighed and turned to head back outside. Sona's manor, master bedroom, 2200. Sona sighed as she laid down in her bed. Her heart was still racing and she was breathing quickly. Her shower had taken longer than she preferred due to the fact that she spent most of it masturbating. She groaned and looked to her left, her gaze traveling up to the visage of the moon through her window. "What is wrong with me?" She mentally screamed at herself, wondering why she had done something so lewd as pleasuring herself. She didn't even think of such things often. Only once before had she done that. His power, his skill, his words, why did all of that turn me on so hard? She kept gazing at the moon as it had always helped her calm down. Her thoughts continued, trying to figure out why she suddenly seemed to be so attracted to her queen. They didn't really know each other, so she shouldn't have been so pulled to him. She looked back at everything they had been doing for the past day. She then recalled the matches they had played in chess. She gasped and her eyes widened. "It was there, it all started there," she whispered. "I created that rule with a vow." She then looked towards the right. Her room was 3 rooms away from Naruto's current room, and she could sense that he was outside. She blushed in embarrassment as she remembered that some yokai had sensitive senses. She shook off that thought but kept staring at the same wall. "I didn't write that rule using a contract, I vowed. Using mana." She then looked at her right hand. The tingling from her earlier actions was still there and she clenched her fingers. Unbidden, a sudden thought came to her mind, of her holding Naruto's hand whilst they were making love. Her breath hitched and she shook the thought from her mind's eye. "Damn it." "Stop that." She almost yelled out loud but kept her mouth quiet. She took a few breaths and turned to look back at the moon. It failed this time to calm her, as she imagined him being with her on a moonlit night and treating her like a goddess. She closed her eyes and couldn't help imagining it. She groaned again, and her left hand almost began to go to her vagina. She stopped herself and sighed. "I won't be getting much sleep tonight." It would be a few days before anyone else realized that Sona Citri was having some trouble. Sona's Manor Entrance Hall, 20th of June, 0800. Tsubaki arrived in a circle of magic, waiting to see if anything had happened. She cast her senses around the property and sighed in relief as she felt that Sona was still alive. "Your loyalty is commendable," spoke the voice of Naruto, making her jump and turn around. She saw the young man standing next to the door. "I would go so far to say that you would have made a decent kunoichi with how loyal you are to your king," he finished saying as he stared out the window to the left of the main door. Tsubaki was a little tense, but she didn't feel like he would try anything. She watched as he continued to gaze out towards the gate of the property. He sighed and turned to her, his strange eyes gazing directly into hers, appearing to gaze directly into her soul. She felt like he was, and it made her nervous. Do not be so tense. I told Sona that I would work with her and you, so you don't need to be like that. I will tell you what I told her yesterday. I never go back on my word. My words are a binding contract. When I promise something, I keep it. He said, before turning to head towards the back of the manor's interior. Tsubaki could feel the truth in his words, but she also felt a sense of despair. He was powerful, and she could also see that he was fast. Should anyone she knew in this town try to fight him, there wouldn't even be a funeral. There wouldn't even be a body to bury. She sighed in relief as he disappeared towards the back entrance. She then turned as she heard Sona coming down the stairway. Did Naruto leave? Her king asked. Tsubaki nodded and turned to head towards the kitchen. Hi Kaichu, he went to the garden area. She said, and knew that Sona would either follow her or head to the dining hall. Tsubaki decided to start making breakfast while still keeping an eye out on Naruto. She walked through the manor towards the kitchen and stopped as she felt a buildup of power. She knew that it was chakra, as she had seen and felt a few other types of yokai do the exact same thing that he was. She turned to look out the window of the dining hall, as did Sona. They watched as he surrounded himself in a blue fire, though they also noticed a few red and purple wisps of the energy throughout it. Sona blushed as she felt a warm presence from the energy, while Tsubaki shivered. He's working on trying to replenish his energy. I didn't know that yokai could do that. Sona said in a whisper. Tsubaki turned to her before looking back out as the power level seemed to stop building. They then noticed how another energy seemed to flow into him and help a little with replenishing his energy. It was small, though, and Sona noticed his frown after a few moments. Tsubaki didn't really know what he was doing and turned to Sona. Sona sighed and worried at her lower lip. Tsubaki knew that she only did this while in deep thought. He is a sage, I noticed that last night, but he is also looking at something in the energy. Sona tuned to head off for her office. She would need a few books to see if she could find information about this. I'll be down in a moment, I need a few texts. Tsubaki nodded before turning to go to the kitchen. Sona's manor office. Sona sighed as she looked through her collection of books, grabbing a few on yokai and any she could find about their senjutsu and chakra practices. She turned to look out the windows behind her desk. She saw Naruto, who appeared to be frowning even harder than a few minutes before. The energy he was taking into himself suddenly stopped flowing, and he stood while appearing to sigh. She saw him look around, his frown deepening even more. Something doesn't seem right, but the plants around him are doing better. What is it? She asked herself. Her mental question was discarded after a moment when she saw him turn to head back inside. She worried at her bottom lip, as she usually did when thinking in private, though it wasn't for long as she turned to head back to the dining hall. She looked to her watch, while using a bit of her magic to have the books follow her. Her watch was reading just a few moments from 10 after 0800. She didn't even notice that she had reached the dining hall a minute later, as she was still going through heavy thought. She heard the doors leading outside open, but didn't even look up to see Naruto enter. She placed her books on the table and sat to open one of the 5 she had grabbed. The smell of breakfast wouldn't hit her for a few minutes, but Naruto's nose twitched as he looked at her. He stayed silent as the smell of frying eggs hit his nostrils, as well as bacon and a few other scents. His eyes narrowed and turned to the front area of the manor. His gaze appeared to reach out beyond the walls and even beyond the boundaries of the property. We will have some visitors soon, Sona. His words broke her trance, and she turned to look at his face. She nodded and turned back to the only volume of text she had on chakra. We'll have Tsubaki's friend over. She wants to join the peerage and become a devil, she said and kept reading. She stopped when he scoffed and turned to look at him again. If you were speaking about a ninja, then I'm afraid I wasn't talking about that. There is a group of mana signatures approaching from the mountains. Their energies don't appear friendly. His voice sounded out. He then turned to her. I'd estimate about 38 hours before they arrive. Sona's eyebrow arched as she looked into his eyes. You can sense them when they are so far away. At his nod, she turned back to the book. She then heard Tsubaki walking into the dining hall and smelled the food. She didn't think about much else, but did plan to test her new queen with whatever was approaching. Sona's manor front courtyard, an hour later. Naruto stood on the roof of Sona's mansion, watching the road as vehicles passed by. He made sure that none could see him by bending the light around him with mana. He used to sigh at the fact that illusions were nearly impossible for him with chakra, though his own experiments had yielded some progress. It's easier now that I have a version of Sasuke's eyes, but I'm more comfortable using mana for it. He watched as more vehicles passed with this thought. He also noticed that Tsubaki had left a few minutes before. He sensed her and a human approaching. He sighed as he saw them walk around the corner from the southeast. I suppose that she would need more followers. At least she seems to be giving them a choice. He waited for them to reach the gate and noticed Sona heading for it from the front door. As Sona arrived at the gate, he leapt. As silent as he was, he knew that they would notice the dust from his landing. He quickly dissolved the illusion around himself and fell the last 40 feet. His landing was silent, but his appearance startled Tsubaki and the girl she was leading. He stood slowly as Sona turned to him. Are you going to be spending most of your time up there? Sona asked him before turning back to the other two. Welcome, Momo. I trust that your trip here was pleasant. She didn't pay attention when Naruto scoffed at the question she had asked, but did notice that his gaze was on the new arrival. Momo was still staring at the blonde, but nodded at Sona. Sona smiled lightly. That is good. Before we begin, I would like to introduce to you my second-in-command, my Queen Peace Naruto Uzumaki. She then turned to head back into the manor. Please follow me, we will continue in my office. Tsubaki noticed that her king was a little out of it at the moment, but she didn't know what could have caused Sona's seemingly negligence to paying attention. Are you all right, Kaichu? She asked. Sona hummed and looked back to her. Hi, just a little tired. I had to make sure everything was ready for today. Sona then turned back and continued to lead them inside. Naruto stopped before reaching the front door and decided to use the shunshin to get there first. Sona sighed, while Momo gasped at how he disappeared. Tsubaki could sense that it wasn't a sigh of frustration, however. She could feel the Citri was a bit relieved, and at the same time confused. What is going on? Sona doesn't seem to be here fully. She asked herself while following the girl with Momo. It took them a few minutes to walk from the first-floor entryway to Sona's office on the second floor, and when they arrived, they found Naruto near Sona's desk. He stood as still as a statue near the open window to their left while facing him. He had a cigarette light and was inhaling from it. Sona smiled slightly as the scent washed over them. It smells nice, she absently thought as she moved to her chair. She would later wonder why she thought that, but it wasn't an issue for that moment. Now then, she said as she sat in her chair, I hope you will come away with some decent knowledge at least. Even if you do not accept becoming a devil, you will still be a friend of Tsubaki's, and I will at least call you friend as well. She then motioned for Momo to take a seat. I also hope that you will at least consider everything carefully, even the consequences that could pop up with others in this town. There are many perks for being turned, however, there are also a few consequences. She then started to explain to Momo about the devil race. Naruto watched silently and also learned a few more things from Sona's words, both about the devil race and of Sona herself. An hour later, Sona sighed in relief, having just turned Momo and getting the girl set up for being her second bishop piece. She had noticed that Naruto watched the ritual with an analytical gaze and had even summoned a notebook to write in. Tsubaki had watched him during the ritual and caught a glance of what he was writing. His notes were detailed about the ritual, even putting side notes on the magical process. Tsubaki had let her know, and she would talk with him about it. Most didn't think to question or actually think about the magical process of changing races. She knew that only Adjuka Beelzebub could say more about it, but even he didn't really take the time to fully research what happens in the resurrection phase. He seems to have a scholarly mentality when it comes to magic. I wonder what type of conversations could come to us. Sona thought as she looked to the clock in her office. It was close to the time that her mother would appear, though she thought it wouldn't be for another hour. That was intriguing, though I'd have to see another ritual to cement the facts of such a ritual. She heard Naruto say, and turned to see him flipping a few of the pages in his notebook. You seem to have a fascination with magic. It is good to see someone taking time to research things that most take for granted. She replied, causing him to turn his gaze to her. There are many reasons that most do not question such things. In Imbu, we are taught to take facts with a pound of salt, when said facts are only given by word of mouth. He responded after a few minutes. The most important words for any critical thinker are who, what, where, when, why, and how. Most do not ask those 6 questions as they are not able to properly think. He finished, turning his gaze back to his notes. Most people either cannot or just do not question what is happening around them. They are like sheep in that regard, and many also take on the guise of a parrot, saying things that have already been said just to make them sound intelligent. I do no such thing. I always question what is happening. I always question everything around me so that I may understand just why they are happening. He said, before walking to the chair in front of her desk. Sona's lips turned upwards slightly, a small smile, though he noticed it was a true one. It pulled at him a little, and he felt his breath catch. That is a good way of living, questioning what is going on around you. You are right that most do not properly think, she said, and then looked into his eyes. I hope that you never let go of that type of personality. Naruto nodded and decided to place the notebook before her. I'm not sure if you know what happens during that ritual, but this is what I saw, though I will have to see another ritual to be certain. Sona took the book and opened it. Her eyes widened after a few minutes of reading it, and her gaze turned back to his eyes. If this is true, then we'll have to get in touch with Beelzebub-sama. He is the one that made the evil pieces, so he might know more, but then again, I can't be certain. He has so many projects going on that he might not have been able to fully research or test what happens. Naruto nodded, though motioned her to keep the notebook. He made a copy of it that he placed in his personal pocket dimension and stood up. He moved to her right, as another magic circle appeared a few feet behind the chair he had just vacated. Sotan! Came the shout of Seraphal Leviathan as she appeared with their mother. The Leviathan then leapt over the desk to hug her sister, but was sent flying the other direction by a backhand from Naruto. The resulting thud was loud, as was the groan from said Satan. Please do not do that again. Naruto spoke while rubbing his left fox ear. The other two gazed at him with wide eyes, and Sona's mouth was open slightly. There was another groan from the still stunned Leviathan, and Sona turned to the body of her sister. She almost laughed at the sight of diplomatic Satan before turning to her mother. You are early, Kasan, she said, and turned back to Seraphal. Sama, please keep in mind that my new queen has sensitive ears. She then blushed slightly, remembering what she did the night before. Damn it, that means he heard me. She would have to set up some sound barriers soon. Especially if it keeps happening, I need to figure out what's going on. Her thoughts made Naruto look at her slightly before he turned back to look at Sona's mother. She didn't know that he could read her surface thoughts every now and then. It was a skill he picked up after his sage training. A type of mental skill he had discreetly had clones research through a few of his tomes on magic, while Killer Bee was supposedly helping him tame Kurama's power. We played those parts well, didn't we? He had asked her before Sasuke caught up with him. It is good to see you, my dear daughter, spoke the other woman after a few minutes of reining in her shock at the blonde man's actions. This brought Naruto's attention to her, and he had to say that they looked alike. Though he would have sworn that she was a sister with a different hair and eye color. After Naruto looked her over for a moment, he turned his attention to the now standing Leviathan. Ow, did you have to hit me so hard? She asked as she approached the desk. Naruto's eyebrow twitched and he sighed. Did you have to be so loud in your greeting, as well as jumping over the desk when I have no idea on who you are? I'm a guardian of Sona for now, and I couldn't be too sure on your intentions whilst dealing with my ear almost exploding. He asked in a monotonous deadpan tone. Seraphal rubbed the back of her head sheepishly and blushed slightly. Amelia also blushed at the sound of his voice and at the power he seemed to throw out with it. She could tell that he was a leader and that only those strong enough could hold such positions outside of the mundane world. And you must be the new queen of my daughter's peerage. I am Amelia Citri. It is a pleasure to meet you. Sona's mother spoke before walking over to shake his hand. As she grasped hands with him, her eyes widened at the sense of power rolling off of him. Uzumaki Naruto, I hope we can get along, Citri-san. He replied, noticing her surprise at the power he was unconsciously throwing out. A contact sensor, those are rare, he thought, remembering one of his tomes giving a small bit of information on that type of sensor. They could sense normally, though if they made physical contact, they could sense everything about a body. And I am magical girl Leviathan. Seraphal said while waving at him. She then saw her mother and sister glare at her. Seraphal Leviathan, formerly Citri, though never married, I am Sotan's elder sister. She corrected herself. Also known as the diplomatic Satan of foreign affairs. Naruto sighed before also offering his hand. A pleasure, just please don't scream so loud again. He then returned to Sona's side. She rubbed the back of her head again, and he finally got a good look at her outfit. He sighed again before taking note of Amelia's dress. It was a royal blue and had a few tree images on the stomach, reaching down to her knees and had a smooth texture. It reached up to cover her shoulders before going on down the back. He couldn't see it, but the back had an image of a great tree. Her arms were bare, except for the elbow-length royal blue gloves. She wore black shoes that were formal, with dark green leggings that disappeared up her dress. The shoes were not high-heeled, and he could tell they were made for fast movement. Her eyes were looking at Sona, and the solid green of them reminded him of emeralds. Her deep blue hair was tied in a ponytail and reached the middle of her back. He could tell it was natural as his eyes finished rolling over her again. It is good to see you, Kasan, one Sama. I will have Tsubaki bring us tea when she returns. Sona said before looking to Naruto. He had scoffed slightly and summoned a tea kettle from his personal pocket dimension. No need, I have tea already. Preferred brand already made. He said, as he placed the kettle on the desk and summoned 3 cups for them to drink with. He then pulled a cup of coffee from his pocket dimension as well, milk and 4 spoons of sugar already added. I get the feeling that you abuse pocket dimensions, don't you, Naru? Sona asked. He shrugged, taking a sip of his coffee. Mallet space was designed to be abusively used to store things inside of it. Mages have long abused it before I was born. What is one more user abusing it when there have already been so many others? He spoke, making 2 of the 3 nod. Don't talk about mallet space, that's breaking the 4th wall. Seraphal nearly shouted. Naruto gazed into her eyes and deadpanned. There is no 4th wall, I disproved that when I was 9. He then pulled a notebook out of his space, as well as a vial that held a silvery smoke-like string in it. My notes and memory of that day. He also pulled a pensive out. Seraphal stared at the objects with a sweat drop rolling down her forehead. How the hell do you have a memory viewer? Asked, turning her eyes back to his. I made it, and it is actually called a pensive. He spoke in a monotone. This made the other 3 gape at him, as most magicians never went into enchanting at such a level. Only the great Mephistopheles of the underworld still actively used enchanting and rune-crafting skills. Adjuka Beelzebub only used them for making the evil pieces and a few other projects, but not so actively. Does it work? Sona asked, after regaining her composure. Naruto nodded and placed it on the desk, though he did have to levitate it there as he still had his hands full. Taking a sip of his coffee, he responded. Hi, it works. One of 13 working models I've made. Since I only had tomes of how to make them, I had to use the trial and error approach with over 30 of them failing. Sona's eyes gleamed a little. No wonder you pick up knowledge so fast, you have to be a prodigy. She whispered, though they could all hear it. She had noticed this after showing him a few things about the world. His eyes saw nearly everything, and he could remember it all as well. Naruto sighed, taking another sip of his coffee. My IQ was nearly 200, but I prefer to work more than the standard genius. There were only 2 people I know of that broke the 200 line, my friend Shikamaru and his father. They were the laziest genius that I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. He sighed and took another sip of coffee. Though I did have to play the role of an idiot with an IQ of below average. Sona gazed at him, as did the others, watching as his eyes seemed to glaze over in memories. It would be a few minutes before he returned from it, so Amelia turned back to look at the objects he had summoned. She then looked at her youngest daughter. So, Sona-chan, what are your plans for this year? Amelia asked. Occult Research Clubroom 1130. Kaneko Taoju sat on the couch she preferred to sit on, munching on a few cookies while still reading the book that Naruto had given her. Her focus was on the book so much that she forgot to leave her ears and tail hidden. Rias watched as Kaneko's eyes slowly moved, reading the book and causing a slight frown to appear across the Nekosho's face. This made the Gremory heiress feel a small amount of worry, as Kaneko's tail twitched in the same way a cat would show annoyance. Kaneko, Rias asked, knowing that the girl would only pay enough attention to get the gist of a conversation. Are you all right? Kaneko didn't respond for a few minutes. She finished the chapter she was reading before turning to stare at her king. Fine. She responded in one word before turning back to the book. Rias winced at the tone as she felt like it was colder than usual. Okay, she's a little angry. She thought and turned as the door opened. Aquino stepped inside and gave her a folder, filled with papers from her brother, and carried the symbol of Lucifer on the folder. After opening the folder and reading a few key pieces from the first page, she sighed. Damn, we can't do anything about this. Sona will have to deal with it. She then continued to read while mumbling to herself. She stopped after reading a bit of the last page, her face going pale. Aquino, she turned to the half-fallen. We need to get a hold of Sona. We may not have any control in Q after this. Aquino narrowed her eyes slightly in a questioning gaze, but nodded and crafted a spell circle to get a hold of Tsubaki. Rias turned back to Kaneko as the younger teen made a noise that sounded like a whimper. The young girl seemed to sweat slightly, and her eyes were widened as she stared at another page. Rias frowned even more than she usually did when dealing with things that concerned her. She was still focused on her contract with Riser, but she did worry more about her peerage than that issue. What is it, Kaneko? She asked the young girl. The white-haired Nekashu didn't answer, and after a few minutes of the young girl staring at the same page, Rias sighed. I'll have to read that book. If it's causing her to be unresponsive, then I need to know. She nodded after that thought, planning to either swipe the book later or make a copy. Sona's Manor 1600. Tsubaki walked into Sona's office after knocking on the door. Kaichu Momo has moved into the room at the beginning of the hall, she said before turning to Sona's mother. Good afternoon, Lady Citri, Leviathan-sama. The three looked to her while the two ladies nodded to Tsubaki. Sona thanked her bishop. Arigato, Tsubaki, I trust that it wasn't a problem. Tsubaki nodded to her king. Hi, Kaichu, no problem with that. However, Akino contacted me not too long ago. Rias needs to speak with you, and it is urgent. Sona nodded before looking to her sister, who giggled. Her eyebrow twitched slightly before she sighed. What is it, Ni-sama? Serafal rubbed the back of her head and smiled sheepishly before answering. I may have conned Surzets into giving you complete control over Q. Her eyes looked up to the right of Sona, a habit she had whenever she was embarrassed about something she did. In exchange, you will have to keep Riser Phoenix from entering the area while Riatan is here. She spoke those last words a bit lowly, as though it was an embarrassing issue. Sona stared at her sister for a moment or two and then sighed again. Please tell me you didn't mention my queen to him. Sona didn't ask, and Serafal's head dropped slightly. Maybe. The Leviathan replied. I might have mentioned that he could, possibly, help Riatan's rook with some things. And I might have gone off on a small tangent to Serzi about his power levels. Her voice fell lower until it was an embarrassed whisper at the end. Sona's eyebrow twitched again. Serafal, I love you, my dear sister, but I must remind you, do not bargain with anyone when it concerns me. Sona said in a cold tone. They all heard a scoffing chuckle from above them and looked up at the high ceiling. Naruto sat upside down while only wearing his Enbu outfit. His Haori was off in his room for the moment, and he had a sword strapped to his back. Another rested on his left hip. It actually sounds like a good deal, gaining complete control over the town while only needing to help keep a certain individual away and helping another with a few things. I will have to ask about which of them was the rook, though. His voice sounded out as though he were bored, yet it still made Sona blush, and Serafal pouted at the sound. Why must you sound so tempting? The Leviathan mumbled. Naruto smirked and opened his eyes while looking at Serafal. I've been told that my voice is naught but a weapon of seduction. Those words were said by a few of my subordinates, of the female gender even. Serafal grumbled while Sona sighed. Kiba might have a rival in terms of fangirls now. The younger of the two said. Naruto shrugged after dropping down from the roof. I don't know who Kiba is, but I can only presume that he could have an army of girls at his beckoning. I don't plan on having the same. He said, and then turned to Tsubaki. Was any of the two I met the one that would need my aid? He asked her. Tsubaki nodded. Hi, the only rook that Rias has, the one you gave that book to. She said before turning back to her king. Shall I schedule a meeting soon, Kaichu? Sona glared at her sister for a moment before turning her gaze to Tsubaki. Hi, we will meet in her clubroom. Tomorrow afternoon. Tsubaki nodded and then turned to leave. I will make sure of it, Kaichu, she said as the door closed behind her. Sona then turned her gaze to Naruto. This meeting may not go over well. Rias can hold a grudge, and if she knows that her brother is the one to sell out her stock in this town, she sighed and closed her eyes. We may have to find some way to calm her. She is not as powerful as Surzet's Lucifer, but her own power can easily level a few miles. She explained to the blonde. He hummed and thought for a few moments, then he responded. I could seal away all mana use in the area we will meet with them. Her power is chaotically large, but it still follows the common rules of mana. Only a primordial or even a primal deity is able to use mana without following the rules. He then turned his gaze out of the window. They are the only beings that my usual sealing methods do not affect. His eyebrow twitched as his gaze took in the closest mountain near Q. Our company is picking up the pace, Sona. They'll be here by midnight. Sona nodded after she stretched her own senses out. She turned to her mother and sister. This will be a good test for you, Naruto. I hope you won't mind us watching how you deal with them. It will allow me to see just what you are capable of. Amelia and Serafal looked towards each other. They nodded and turned back to Sona. Amelia spoke first. Hi, we would like to see if you are as skilled as you are powerful. It would be nice to know that you can protect Sona, who you are contracted to marry now. Serafal glared at Naruto before speaking. Indeed, just know, young man, I don't care how powerful you are. If you hurt Sotan, I will destroy you. The last part of the threat was said a bit faster than normal speech, but they all knew what she was saying. Naruto smiled slightly while his gaze still looked out the window. I can respect that sentiment. Maybe I can find a few new precious ones here. He then turned to them, though he wiped the small smile from his face. "You don't need to worry about that," he said before turning back to the window. Abandoned Church of Kuo, 1930. On the last row of pews within the abandoned and derelict church sat a young girl. Her hair was long and tied into a ponytail and blacker than the night sky. Her eyes were just as black, and she seemed to stare out at the altar with a cold look of apathy. She sighed before turned her eyes to the left, watching as another person sat down on the pew across the aisle. The new person was female and had hair that was nearly as black as her own. The eyes of this new one were a reddish purple and were gazing just as coldly at the altar. The young-looking girl sighed as she saw the outfit, a two-piece BDSM-styled bikini with high-reaching, high-heeled boots. "You called Lady Off-Eyes, I am here," came the voice of the newly sat young woman. Off-Eyes hummed, yet remained silent for a little while, still staring at the ruined altar, knowing that her current visitor would wait for her to speak. "I have a champion now, Rainier. Though he does not yet know it, he will be the one to help stop the true apocalypse." Her words came out slow and seemed cold. The young woman who was named Rainier nodded. "I take it that you would like me to watch over your champion. Is this correct, Off-Eyes-sama?" she asked, turning to the being that could easily destroy the earth. Off-Eyes nodded and stood, turning to Rainier. "Yes. I would like for you to keep an eye out on him. His name is Naruto Uzumaki, and he is a Cuba no Kitsune, though he has been resurrected as a devil by Sona Citri." She then turned to leave but continued speaking. "Do not test him. He is capable of fighting both myself and the Great Red. Be sure to keep me informed of what is happening both here and in the Grigori." Rainier nodded but sighed after Off-Eyes fully left. She turned her gaze back to the altar after watching her true leader leave. "I suppose that plans are changing. Azazel and even Cockabeel would like to have this information, though they are likely to know soon." She sighed again after speaking, and then turned her eyes upwards into the rotting rafters of the church. She formed a magic circle and left after 30 minutes of staring into the darkened area of the ceiling. Sona's Manor, entryway 2300. Naruto waited by the front door with his eyes closed and arms crossed. He had sensed two other beings in town earlier, and one was slightly familiar. The other was far too weak to be of a concern in a fight, but he didn't know if the other one would try anything whilst they slept. Paranoid I may be, but still, paranoia has been the best friend of many strong shinobi. He sighed after that thought and continued waiting. He changed his outfit earlier, deciding to wear something even darker and more modern than his typical Anbu gear. He now wore black cargo pants with boots that were just as dark, a belted waist cape that was just as black to cover his 9 tails. The cape held a dark crimson fox's head, resting right over the right leg. His left leg was only partially covered in the front, and had the kanji for honor just below the waist. His shirt was now a black muscle shirt with a long left sleeve covering his left arm, while the right was sleeveless. The neckline of the shirt was extended to his chin, and held a V-line that reached just above the middle of his chest. Both arms had black bracers on them to protect his lower arms. His pants hid the black metal plates to protect his shins, and his shirt hid a specialized mesh material to protect his torso. On the belt holding his cape, he had a short sword that was double-edged resting from the right hip on the back side of the belt. He placed it there to grab in a reverse grapple style. On his left hip sat a black pouch that was filled with shinobi gear: kunai, shuriken, smoke bombs, and senbin. His back held a katana, the hilt resting just behind his right shoulder. The weapons were under a minor illusion, so as not to be seen by normal eyes. Not even a seraph would be able to see them, though it had to have seals placed to do so. His control may be light years better than what he had to act with on his final mission, but chakra-based illusions were still a bit of a pain for him. He also thought of carrying a few sealing scrolls to go in the chest belt that was a dark crimson X over his chest, but decided against it. He sighed as the time ticked slowly to midnight. They would leave about 5 minutes before, though Sona had wanted to leave a bit earlier than that. He had pushed for only 5 minutes, as he could lay traps faster than she would think possible for most. It was Amelia that had actually gotten Sona to listen, though he didn't really care about that too much. "You do know that this will be far too easy, right, Naruto-kun?" Kurama asked through the mental connection she held with him. Naruto sighed and responded out loud. "Hi, but it is needed for them to see firsthand how good I am." Kurama hummed in agreement, but didn't want to wait patiently for this test to start. "True, but I still think it's a waste of time." Naruto chuckled and nodded. "Hi, though you believe that taking out any who are weak is nothing but a waste." He then went silent and turned his head to the left. Opening his eyes, he spied the newest member of Sona's peerage trying to subtly spy on him from the parlor room. When Momo noticed he had caught her, she eeped, before quickly hiding away behind the wall. This made his right eyebrow raise up and silently chuckle again. "Doesn't that remind you of someone, Kura-chan?" He mentally asked the kitsune that was sealed in him. Her chuckle was heard, though she did not say anything. She also cut the connection so that her voice wouldn't be heard by him for a little while. He wouldn't know that she was getting jealous of the fact that other females were paying attention to him for quite some time. He closed his eyes again and would keep an ear out for when the other three would arrive. He cast his thoughts to what he knew of the mana arts and decided that he would need to study more about them. Along with learning of this world's background, I'll be reading a lot in the next few months. He sighed as that thought went through his head. He didn't notice that Sona was watching him from the top of the stairs, or that she was seeing how calm his mana was. She was silent, and also chewing on her bottom lip in a type of thinking gesture. Her thoughts were not only on the small test he would be taking in a while, but were also on her oath about that rule she had made. Her blush was small, almost unnoticeable. It would have increased if she started thinking about everything she had seen from the other night, from when she was healing him. She was quite a bit more prudish than Ria's. That was a fact that many in the Gremory group knew, but she wasn't exactly against nudity in a private setting. She shook her head to get rid of thoughts that would make her blush even more, so as not to be grilled about it by her mother. Though if Serafal asked, she would admit he was impressive in the nude. She shook such thoughts from her head again and turned to walk back to her office. She felt that it would be best to keep her mind busy with other things. They still had 40 minutes before they would leave. Naruto opened his eyes exactly 38 minutes later. He sensed Sona, Serafal, and Amelia as they walked down the stairs. Their footsteps were more quiet than usual due to the carpet they stepped on. His ears still twitched, though, and he could have sworn that he could hear a fly buzzing a few hundred yards away. He cast his eyes upwards to see them step off of the stairs. He stood up from his leaning against the wall and moved forward. From his front right pocket, he pulled out a pair of crimson shades and placed them on. He also pulled out his half-empty pack of cigarettes, took one, and placed it in his mouth. He would wait to light it, as teleporting with a combustible substance lit up would be too hazardous. As the three ladies approached, he turned his eyes to the left and spoke. "You might as well allow them to follow Sona. They could learn a few things by watching." His voice still sounded bored and his stance appeared lazy. At least it did to a normal person or a newbie. Sona could tell that his stance was a ruse, though she got the feeling that he would be bored with this test. "I suppose you may be correct about that," she said before turning to her right. "Tsubaki, Momo, come." She tersely commanded. Momo stepped out from the parlor. She hadn't left that room for a little while. She nodded and stepped forth to join the group. She didn't know what was going on, but figured she would at least learn something about being a devil. Tsubaki leapt down from the second story. She then landed right behind Sona's left shoulder and bowed her head slightly. "Hi, Kaichu." Sona turned back to Naruto, while Serafal's eyes glistened in slight interest. The Leviathan knew they were there, but their power was far too small to pay much attention to with her senses. Sona narrowed her eyes, feeling a small chill run down her spine, as well as a small amount of curious excitement. "Lead the way, Naruto," she said, and locked him in her sense before crafting a teleportation circle. The rest saw him step back into the shadows near the door. For a brief second, all they saw was the light reflecting from his sunglasses before even those disappeared. Serafal gaped as he truly seemed to disappear. She couldn't even sense him anymore and was about to ask what happened. The others were about to as well, but they were pulled through the circle to their destination before any could say a word. The western woods of Kyo, 2355. Off-Eyes faded into existence, sitting on a tree branch as the magic circle of the Citri family appeared below her. From the circle's light, she saw Sona, Tsubaki, Serafal, Amelia, and a new devil appear. She smirked slightly, knowing that Naruto had appeared here a few seconds before. She watched as he approached the group, appearing to step straight out of the shadows of the tree across from them. She also knew that he had already laid traps. "Let me give you a bit more of a challenge, my champion." She smirked and released a small amount of her power. She placed a small tear in the fabric of dimensions, but would wait to open it until after he had dealt with the grunts. She knew he had sensed her presence and the small rip. She knew his eyes were on her the moment she arrived and decided to wave at him slightly. She heard him scoff and mentally grinned at the sound. Sona spoke while stepping forth a few feet. "I hope you are prepared, Naruto. Please keep in mind that when they arrive, I will place a barrier around the battlefield. This will keep the battle in an alternate dimension, a pocket space, if you will. She turned back to give Seraphol a look. This will keep the outside world from seeing and feeling anything that goes on here, and it will keep the damage from affecting the physical world. Seraphol Nisama will supply the power necessary for the barrier to keep it all in this place. Naruto hummed, understanding what she was saying, but knew that Offeyes would have to help with that. Let us see if you are as good as the legends claim, our Ouroboros. He then turned away from them, facing the west. Sona raised an eyebrow and looked around. Are you going to place some traps? She asked, not seeing anything that could indicate a trap of any kind. She heard him chuckle lowly and turned her eyes to him. His response was almost a whisper, but she heard it clearly. Already done. She narrowed her eyes and looked around again. Not seeing anything, she decided to open her senses more. She couldn't really feel much in the way of mana, but she did sense something was amiss. She looked around again and saw a few glowing marks on many of the trees. She only saw this by using her mana with her eyes, and her eyebrows furrowed slightly. The marks were symbols that she had never seen before and seemed to be holding something back, almost like mines. She realized after a few seconds. She cast her gaze back to him and nodded before stepping back. They are here. He spoke after a minute. Sona nodded and turned to her sister, who was already casting a barrier around the area. It was 1 square kilometer in circumference, and most of the group could sense 20 new creatures in the area. Momo could not feel it yet, but Naruto sighed, only 20, damn, alerted her to the fact that they were being watched. Naruto pulled his katana from its scabbard as a beast leapt out of the tree line. It was monstrous in the fact that it appeared like a medium-sized chimera. It had the body of a scaled lion with large bat-like wings, a tail that looked more like an alligator's with spikes on the end and protrusions sticking out of its hind legs. The head, however, made Momo gape and blush. It was a completely naked man from the knees up. The grin on the man's face was far too insane for anyone to look at properly. His penis was erect, yet looked a sickeningly black and was leaking a green fluid. I didn't need to see that. Naruto spoke lowly and sighed again. After his words were spoken, the other 19 appeared as well. Each was grotesque and looked like things that even a mother would not be able to love. The first laughed after gazing at them all. Looky here, guys, we got grub and some entertainment. He cackled before an earth spike shot up through his skull. The others stopped laughing as they watched their leader die. It was quite for a moment before Naruto spoke again. One down, you all are next, he said before raising his left hand in a half-tiger handseal. He rushed forward as soon as his chakra activated the other 5 seals he had placed in the area. There were 3 explosions and 2 puffs of smoke that came from the seals. The 3 closest exploded in fire, lightning, and magma, taking out 11 of the creatures in the middle. 2 more fell from being impaled by 2 other earth spikes. The last 6 tried to turn and rush him, but he had already appeared behind 2 of them and cut them in half with his sword. He was bored. These things were nearly as bad as the armies of bandits he had already killed by the age of 14. So many corpses, how many more will I add to my resume? He mentally asked himself before deciding to tone it down a bit. He at least wanted to get a better challenge out of this. He also wanted to at least show his current audience that his skill was equal to his power. It had only taken a few seconds for Sona to realize that 16 of the strays were dead before they could really move, or at least try to. Her eyes widened slightly when she noticed Naruto was shifting to a lower gear and started to showcase his skill. She watched as he danced around the 4 strays, leaving small nicks or taking a limb. It was still fast enough to be impressive, better than even Ria's knight, but she could keep up with it now. He wasn't using the style she had seen the night before, but she could at least see it was designed to weaken opponents by leaving small wounds while taking 1 or 2 limbs for maximum effect. He had reversed the grip on his katana, and although it was hard to notice, she could see his left hand clenched in a fist while shaking it lightly. She checked it using her senses and realized that he was releasing small amounts of power through it to stabilize his sword arm. The power wasn't very familiar, but she could tell that it was necessary for him to live. Is that his chakra? I thought chakra was purely spiritual. I'll have to research this. She mentally told herself, as Naruto took one of the stray's heads from its shoulders. She felt something more than just spiritual energy coming from him now that she was looking at him while using her own mana sense. Only 3 left, and they're as slow as a standard freshly promoted Chunin. Naruto sighed after that thought, while dodging a strike from his left by the one who looked like a part lizard with bat-like wings and a naked female. He took the same arm that attacked him from the beast and threw it into the chest of the wolf and serpent-looking male. He then swirled around the female while decapitating her and paused to stare at the last opponent. It was part horse, part cat, and part female human. No, part devil. Most of these things may have been human once. He then straightened his stance and stared directly into the creature's eyes. You are all that is left. Will you fight your fate, or will you give in? He spoke, and all remaining in the clearing shivered at the coldness his voice portrayed. Off-Eyes and Sona didn't shiver in fear, though. Off-Eyes didn't understand what her body was doing, but she felt a heat bubble up in her chest and abdomen. She would try to figure it out later, but for now, she wanted to see how her champion would destroy the beast. Sona knew exactly what was happening with her and blushed even more fiercely than she normally did when he spoke. Damn it! That tone reminds me of Nisama's diamond dust spell. Please tell me he won't use it much. Otherwise, I might try bringing him to my bed faster than is proper. Her thoughts made her blush even more, but she spotted him shift his stance again. He sheathed his blade, but pulled the scabbard to his left hand. Shifting his left foot backwards slightly, he then placed his right hand on the handle of his sword. The blade was facing the sky in the scabbard, and he flicked it out only slightly. The beast roared in defiance and lunged to try and hit him. It never made it the rest of the 20 feet between itself and his own position. He quickly sliced the blade through the air before flourishing and then quickly sheathing the blade. The beast stopped as his attack had already connected, his hand keeping the blade from fully being sheathed. He spoke once more. May you be judged for all that you have done. Accept your demise and go in peace. He then sheathed the blade fully. All but Sona wondered what had happened before the creature fell into a few hundred pieces, being torn apart by flashes of silver that streaked through it from multiple angles and directions. The blood spray from the beast painted the surrounding 10 feet from it, and the gore left behind fell in a way that one would think a child had just destroyed a block castle. Amelia, Serafal, Tsubaki, and Momo all gasped in slight amazement. As well as fear, though Serafal started to feel like the temperature was rising. He then turned and slowly strolled towards them after placing the sheath of his katana back over his shoulder. His eyes glowed eerily in the moonlight, and the shadows casted on his face from his hair made it appear as though an angry god had just cast his judgment. Off-Eyes smirked, though she felt that heat get stronger. She decided to cancel the summoning for a stronger opponent and just gazed at the blonde in slight wonder. For he had done something with that technique to create a sphere of compressed void power and cast his sword slice through it while multiplying the number of slices. You really do look like a devil right now, Naruto-kun, as well as a god. I hope to see more soon. She thought, before disappearing without making a sound to tell that she had been there. She also failed to notice that she had called his name with an affectionate suffix. Sona's office 0045 21st of June. Sona sighed as she looked through the document that Serafal had given her. It was marked with the symbol of House Lucifer, so it was official. I now own Q, she sighed again as her thoughts turned back to the small fight she had seen less than 40 minutes before. No, it was a massacre, and his cold tone, she thought as another blush grafted to her cheeks. Her right hand moved to her stomach and then started moving lower. She stopped herself after realizing what she was doing. Damn it, stop that. She mentally commanded herself and tried to shift her mind to something else. Her thoughts were derailed by her mother's voice. You're getting worked up about something, dear. Mind telling me what it is? That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share, and do comments.